Sit down. Sit down. Happy Wednesday, everyone. So if you were going about your business yesterday and suddenly felt the earth shudder on its axis, it's not because Jerry Nadler tipped over.
Damn.
No, it's that Congress actually got something right. In a bipartisan vote, the House of Reps censured Rashida Tlaib. Okay. Censuring. It's less effective than putting Carmex on a cold sore, but we'll take it. For even 22 Democrats, Tlaib's statements blaming Israel and America for the 10/7 attacks while calling the Hamas massacre resistance were simply too much. True, Tlaib is so nutty, she's asked not to sit near people with allergies. Now, censuring doesn't really amount to much. It's the congressional equivalent of fining Hamas for trespassing. But it seems the Dems are finally waking up to the out-of-control monsters they've created. It's probably how Steve Doocy felt when Peter turned 12. Here's how Tlaib's fellow squad monsters tried to defend her.
What is true here is that every single one of them has not acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are dying in the tens of thousands, but will continue to say it is us who are not acknowledging humanity.
This elected body enslaved black people. Racism and sexism, Islamophobia get pushed off of elevators, xenophobia and more right here in this workplace.
Maybe because of your lack of diversity, you lack the cognitive and emotional ability to recognize diverse opinions when they speak truth to power.
Whoa. No wonder Trump wants to bring back asylums. I bet Ilhan Omar's brother is so glad she divorced him. But if they build those asylums, they better build them big, because tens of thousands of college kids now believe anti-Semitism is something you get extra credit for. They prefer brutal dictatorships, one that counter their novel pronouns with a noose. So like confused parents, mainstream Dems are scrambling to come up with a way to tell their spoiled brat children, behave or go to your room. So how do we get to a point where young Dems think terrorists are the good guys, while the state of Israel, the freest nation in the Mideast, deserves to be destroyed? Well, here's some history that the brats never learned. When Israel became an independent state in the 1940s, progressives supported it. Coming out of World War II, the Holocaust, and a history of pogroms, it was Jews who were seen as the oppressed. And boy, is that an understatement to call 6 million people exterminated oppressed. It's like calling me kind of cute. African Americans recalled that Jews had marched with them in civil rights demonstrations. Jews there had been arrested and even killed. Too bad academia loves hiding facts like that. But then a strange thing happened. Israel committed the great unpardonable sin. Much like me, it was successful. And worse, it looked a lot like America while doing it. And no one hates success more than malicious failures. Suddenly, Israel was no longer a safe haven for a people who had been targeted throughout history. It was no longer the little country that could. It was an oppressor. Nobody loves fighting the man like a Democrat. And it's all based in envy. It's what progressives have instead of actual progress. You know, we can't build, so let's tear down is their motto. So when America went to war in the Mideast after 9/11, you just knew sooner or later the left would decide that we were the bad guy, which meant, of course, our one true ally in the Mideast must be one too. It's the basic progressive formula. America is a racist oppressor, and if you help it, then you are too. But what about the millions of mostly black and brown illegals pouring over our southern border right now? Guess they must love racist oppression too. But if you spent your time burning down buildings instead of going to class, that formula makes sense. And when the left gives the arsonists trophies, it only grows. But the full tilt away from Israel finally came with that OG progressive Barack Obama. Imagine looking at the Mideast and deciding the Iranians are the good.
First, we have more troubling news from the Middle East tonight. A $30 million U.S. Reaper drone was shot out over the sky over international airspace by Iranian-backed, the Houthi rebels and terrorists in Yemen. Again, we must start out by asking your commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, Mr. President, what are you going to do about this? Meanwhile, we have U.S. soldiers suffering yet another 2 attacks at bases in the Middle East today by other Iranian proxies. And so far, there have been 42 attacks against our U.S. soldiers carried out by Iranian-linked terrorists in the past month alone. Now, Joe's response was to take out 2 small empty warehouses. And just hours ago, apparently another, quote, small retaliatory U.S. airstrike against whatever assets they hit in Syria. We'll find out sometime in the next day or two. That's it? Joe Biden he's not going to take any substantial action to prevent further attacks against American troops abroad? Is he going to just, keep on bombing empty warehouses? Because think about this. If China, they have all these hostile actions against American fighter jets in international airspace, no response. China takes hostile actions against our Navy in international waters. Well, Joe gives no response. China's spy balloon, what happened? It got to fly eight days over our country, over our military installations, no response. China's hostile actions over Taiwan and their airspace, no response. Russia shoots down our drones, no response. Is it because Joe wants more, financial business deals with China and Russia that he won't take action against these hostile regimes? Or is he just a pathetically weak U.S. president? We'll let you answer. Now, meanwhile, back at home, anti-Semitism, it is exploding. I never thought I'd see this in our lifetime. Did anyone ever think this? Never thought I would see this in our lifetime, including in the halls of Congress. This as Jewish Americans are now still being held hostage by terrorists in a war zone. And by the way, Joe, why are you not demanding the release of all of these hostages, including Americans that are being held hostage? Where is your president tonight? I'm sure he's sleeping. I'm sure he doesn't know that today is Wednesday. And as anti-American sentiment is on the rise and the threat of terrorism is now spiking, is Joe Biden going to do anything to secure our southern border? Is he going to do anything at all? Because we now know the Department of Homeland Security, there's Alejandro Mayorkas testified today. He has no idea at all how many illegal immigrants are currently in our country, or where they're from, or why they're here. We know thousands from countries like Iran, Syria, other places in the Middle East, Russia, China. Joe has let in almost 8 million illegal immigrants. It may be 10 million by the end of the year. This is insanity. And it's just another horrible, chaotic day under President Joe Biden. But according to last night's election results, Americans seem pretty unfazed, at least on the surface. We're going to break all of this down. Let's start in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where state Democrats were able to hold on to a slim majority in the Senate there and pick up a slim majority in the House of Delegates. Now, some are trying to blame Governor Glenn Youngkin and his expansive get out the vote effort. Here's the reality. Virginia, whether you want to believe it or not, I had given up on Virginia years ago. It is a blue state. It's not even a purple state. The anomaly in Virginia happened 2 years ago when Glenn Youngkin won the governorship.
Biden down 11 points in September. I personally think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have Rashida Tlaib primary him. National Movement Against Genocide and funding to a government whose people enjoy universal health care.
Again, this is too much to ask Rashida Tlaib to do right now.
It'd be nice if somebody else ran though, and because it's like, what if Biden just dies? Like, where this party at? People act like we're preserving democracy. They're so afraid because there's terror that somebody else should be running for president right now, Pritzker or somebody.
I mean, that's all right. Let's have this conversation. I mean, that is the dilemma. I got to say, I go back and forth every day but before we even engage in this, the I don't know that there is anything that can be done to dislodge Biden from the candidacy, and we can we can have a conversation about like whether that would be wise or not. But at the end of the day, it's like one guy's decision, and until he drops out, every presidential hopeful is calculating, I'm better off waiting 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, and this is a decision I was saying that DeSantis should have made when he got into the race. Is like, why are you doing this now? Because, you may be there if Donald Trump dies or goes to, but you have to enter into it. Nobody's going to enter in to run against Biden because they don't want to be responsible for Biden losing the election, because every time there is a primary, and B, they're like 2028, there's not going to be incumbent.
Yeah. And that's the calculation. I mean, this conversation should have been had months ago, or if Biden was going to make the decision, it should have happened months ago. But then at the same time, we couldn't have foreseen October 7th and the insane, Israeli mass killings in Gaza during that period. But
there's still time, and LBJ decided because of Vietnam, like he's not going to run. That's what Biden should do now, especially because he was saying it during the actual campaign that, you know what, I actually won't run for a second term. He shouldn't, and he's probably going to.
Put up this polling, because this is the problem. There's two sets of polls, but let's go through this. And I mean, I vacillate back and forth in terms of this, and. This is the second poll that we've had in a row. I don't know, the numbers aren't exactly the same, but the dynamic is where we see the swing states. In Nevada, Trump is up 10 points, which seems excessive, but who knows?
I mean, they just elected a Democratic senator a year ago. That is a big problem for Biden.
In Michigan, Trump up by 5. In Georgia, Trump up by 6. In Pennsylvania, Trump up by 4. In Arizona, Trump up by 5. In Wisconsin, Biden up by 2. Now, I don't know how to explain that, other than I don't know how to explain that. And here's the other poll that is getting compared to it. These are actually juxtaposed by Intermedium. I can never pronounce.
Adingermentum.
If Joe Biden were not the Democratic nominee, do you think you would definitely vote for the Democratic candidate? 30% of registered voters said that. Probably vote for the Democratic candidate, 18%. So it's 48%. Those numbers are reflected across the board in the states, more or less, almost identical. Those 5 states. Would you probably vote or definitely vote for Donald Trump? That number is 40%. So it's the inverse, essentially, in those states. If it was a generic Democrat. The problem is that you can't run a generic Democrat, and you can't just sort of like have them appear on the ballot. It has to be a person, obviously, who has a name and a record and a profile. And you need to get to the point where they can get on the ballot, and everything that happens in there. And I don't know. I don't know if the power of the incumbency versus how a nominee would get to be, because you would have people who would be like, why isn't Kamala Harris the nominee? And I think a lot of people don't want Kamala Harris, don't feel like she's up to the job, not just as a function of vice president, but, she in her campaign to run for president, didn't really express a deep sort of like commitment to much, it seems to me, but other people's mileage will vary, and that being the point. They will be like, well, how doesn't she automatically not become the nominee? It's not inconceivable that the reason why Biden isn't stepping down, like he sort of suggested he might, could be because he was concerned, like, she's not ready to be president. Maybe she'll never be ready. I don't know. This is speculation on my part. And
I think it's informed speculation based on some of the opinions that have been leaked about her team and her
right. And they
abilities.
may not know. Biden may not be able to assess it. Who knows? But the primary itself, to the extent that you can have one, I mean, we are like 2 months out from deadlines to be on the ballot in at least 3 or 4 states, something like that. More than likely, it would. You've got people like Newsom and what's her
Gretchen Whitmer. And Pritzker.
I mean, I don't know, arguably folks like Shapiro in Pennsylvania, maybe, I don't know. But Pritzker is the only one who can come in and say, okay, I've got $3 billion and I'm going to spend, I don't know, 100 million and get on the ballot everywhere. I'm not going to have to fundraise. I'm just going to go out and hire people and worry about the excitement later.
And that's, I think, why we should just quickly show this Axelrod tweet.
This is interesting that Emma picked this up because of your huge fandom for David Axelrod.
Oh,
you always follow David Axelrod all the time.
How do you remember that I secretly was an Axelrod fan at 14?
Is that true?
Yes,
No, I had no idea.
I was. When I was an Obama fangirl, but those days are behind me now. So. Obviously, Axelrod is deeply connected with the Democratic Party machine in Illinois and in Chicago, right? Now, him saying this here...
Well, here, read it out so that people can...
This is a huge thing for him to publicly say. It's very late to change horses. A lot will happen in the next year that no one can predict, and Biden's team says his resolve is to run his firm. He's defied CW before, conventional wisdom, but this will send tremors of doubt through the party, not bedwetting, but legitimate concern. The president of the United States is justly proud of his accomplishments. Trump is a dangerous, unhinged demagogue whose brazen disdain for the rules, norms, laws, and institutions or democracy should be disqualifying. But the stakes of miscalculation here are too dramatic to ignore. Only Joe Biden can make this decision. If he continues to run, he will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. What he needs to decide is whether that is wise, whether it's in his best interest or the country's, which is him saying it's not wise. And we have a very well-funded candidate waiting in Chicago that's in the wings and is charismatic and popular in his state.
Well, to be clear, if you frame the question as it being whether it's in his best interest or the country's, it's an interesting framing, because you could say, like, are they making the right calculation? That their intent is definitely to be in the best interest of the countries, but are they making the right assessment of that? But he's actually saying, and we should note that he tags him. I don't know that Joe Biden's actually scrolling through Twitter, but
it's very pointed from Axelrod.
What the hell, man?
And again, your point that Axelrod is very enmeshed with Obama and with the Illinois politics, and Obama appointed Penny Pritzker Commerce Secretary. She was horrible, incidentally,
you told Time magazine recently, we can actually win this. Do you really believe that?
Well, I think the real question is, can the American people win this? The American people are dropping out of this rigged political system at record numbers. The current Democratic and Republican candidates have the highest rate of distrust and dislike ever, and the largest proportion ever of the American public, a majority, in fact, is clamoring for something else. The question really is whether the American people will get to hear that they actually have other choices. I'm the only candidate in this race who is not poisoned by corporate money, lobbyists, and super PACs. I'm a physician, not a politician. The American people are sick of this rigged political system and the rigged economy that it has delivered for them.
But I was surprised to see you say that you could actually win, because you're not even guaranteed to be on the ballot in every state. I mean, you saying you can win is rather like me saying I can be 6 foot. Now I'm 5'4" and there's no chance.
Well, it's like saying, do our students have a chance of getting out of debt? Right now, we have 43 million young people and not so young people who are trapped in predatory student loan debt with part-time and low-wage jobs, which is what's come back right now, and really no prospect for ever getting out of this indentured servitude that they're in. If they hear that they have a chance to go to the polls and vote to cancel their debt, I would bail out the students like the political establishment bailed out the crooks on Wall Street. 42 million is enough to actually win the vote. So the real is enough to win the presidential race. So the real question here is whether the American people will be empowered to do what they are clamoring for, which is to break out of this rigged political system.
Okay, I'll come back to policy in greater detail in a moment, but isn't your biggest influence in this election going to be where Bernie Sanders supporters end up going, to Hillary Clinton or to you?
You know, Bernie Sanders supporters are part of the a big part of our supporters, but it's not limited to Bernie Sanders supporters. Remember, there are about half of Americans who don't come out to vote because they don't have something to vote for. I'm the only candidate that's calling for an emergency jobs program of living wage, good jobs that will actually address the crisis of the climate.
But
to address both crises at once, I'm calling for a Green New Deal.
The reason I interrupt you, and apologies for that, the reason for that question is you clearly are hoping to benefit from Bernie Sanders supporters coming to you. Are you comfortable in the knowledge that if that happens in great numbers, you could end up putting Donald Trump into the White House?
So first, there's not a new entitlement here in the United States calling the entitlement to votes. Big establishment politicians are not entitled to our votes. They have to earn them. And what polls show is that these are the most unpopular and disliked candidates ever, even their own support.
Welcome to a special edition of Straight Outta Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm known as CJ Online. That stands for Compton J. That's because my name is Jay in real life, and I'm from the city of Compton. I always say Compton, LA. We really, those of us, a lot of us from Compton, we use that interchangeably. It's like the same thing almost. And it's really just telling you more of where you geographically live, but we still consider that like I'm LA. But anyway, welcome to the show. Straight Outta Politics is what we're going with today. Although Nick may join in a little bit, we'll see if he can, because we have Nick and CJ tomorrow, but this news about Dr. Jill Stein running, this cannot wait until tomorrow. So we had to cover it today. And that's what we're going to be doing along with the regular planned show. And I'll show you what that is now. And I'll get back to the Dr. Jill stuff. So at the last minute, I got the graphic updated, took out Kamala Harris and added Dr. Jill Stein. But from left to right, of course, one of the big news stories is Rashida Tlaib got censured. So we're going to cover that. Max Blumenthal really gives it to the State Department in a news conference that we're going to be covering. And then there's an interview with Glenn Greenwald, goes on the Tucker Carlson show on X, aka Twitter. We'll be discussing that. They talk about Joe Biden along with the lack of free speech sort of advocacy coming from the right wing when it comes to free Palestine protests. So we'll talk about that. And then there's a couple of stories with RFK Jr. The initial story I was going to run with is he's just another swamp monster, and we're going to cover that because there's a video about him talking about pretty much he sounds like a warmonger. But then there's also the poll that has come out recently that shows him getting a pretty substantial amount of the vote when pinned against him and Donald Trump, and I'm sorry, Joe Biden. Joe Biden, Donald Trump get around 33%, and he gets 25%. So we'll cover that story too. And then, of course, we're going to be starting what we've already started with, and that is the news of Dr. Jill Stein running. And I found this video in preparing for the show, and I couldn't believe as I was watching it, it could be a video of something that's right now. This is a video from her last run. This literally, if she put this out and this was today, this literally could be today because it's the same two candidates, or it's the same sort of candidate dynamic, Trump versus establishment Democrat. And a lot of what she said is in the beginning part of this video is like, man, it's indistinguishable from what's happening today. So I wanted to start with that. And then let me go ahead now and bring up, where are we at here? Let's go to Twitter from here. So let's go ahead and bring up the announcement video. And she also has an announcement tweet we're going to be covering. Also, so let's just get right into the first story. And that is, it is sort of breaking news. It was announced an hour before I was to go live. And I'll show you the progression. And it's kind of and the reason it says Jill Stein files is because we saw this report first, or I saw this report first. And it came out a little more than an hour, almost 2 hours before she made the announcement. And I'll read. So I was going to cover it as she's filing. Obviously, she's going to run. Now, I don't know if her campaign leaked the story or whatever happened, but this person reports with Cornel West abandoning the Green Party line to try to run for president of the United States as an independent, 2016 candidate Jill Stein has stepped up to fill the void, filed FEC paperwork to run in 2024. And then there was the receipt there, statement of candidacy. This looks like, wow, this is just filed the 7th. So 2 days ago, Jill Stein in Massachusetts, Jill Stein for president. And there's the P.O. box. So for those that may want to be supporting her, there's where it's listed the P.O. box. Got some chocolate muffins I'll be munching on. Anyway, here, so we're going to play the video first, and then we're going to read her statement. But let's read the caption of the tweet, and this is Dr. Jill Stein herself. The political system is broken. Over 60% of us now say the two-party establishment has failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm running for president to offer a better choice for the people. Join us. JillStein2024.com. And let's listen to the attached video Actually, let me read the rest of the thread, and then I'll show the video. Let's put a pro-worker, anti-war, climate emergency agenda front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians, tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked into student debt and medical debt, with child poverty doubling, rising disease and diseases of despair, and growing hopelessness. The ruling party that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, and health care. The two parties of war and Wall Street are bought and paid for. The Democrats have portrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. Both establishment parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protests, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debate, rigging their primaries, and using their power to serve their wealthy donors instead of the people. Now, I'm going to pause here because I do want to get back to that, but I don't want to step too much over the video, just in case that's just a written version of her speech here. So let's listen to the video, then I'll get back to the reading of the thread. Let's listen.
People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked in student debt and medical debt, child poverty doubling, rising diseases of despair, growing hopelessness. The political system is broken. The two Wall Street parties are bought and paid for. Over 60% of us now say the bipartisan establishment's failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm Jill Stein, and I'm running for president to offer that choice for the people outside of the failed two-party system. We'll put solutions to the crises we face, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And we'll put these front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. The ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, healthcare. Democrats have betrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. And both parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protest, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debates,
American people who've been systematically locked out of these debates,
rigging their primaries. So forget the pundits and the attack dogs who tell you to ignore your misery and just keep voting for those who caused it in the first place. Change won't come from the ruling elites. It comes from we, the people. And when we stand together, we can create living wage jobs for all Americans. We can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, to health care, to housing, to food, education, and more. We can abolish student debt, medical debt. We can create a Green New Deal with millions of jobs to fight climate collapse and protect Mother Earth. And we can ensure our constitutional rights and freedoms and justice for all. We can end the endless wars and rampant militarism and use diplomacy and international law instead to end violence, occupation, and apartheid. We do have the power, and we can use it in this election to start building an America and a world that works for all of us. Go to JillStein2024.com and join us.
So there goes Dr. Jill Stein's announcement video. And as I thought, as I was reading the thread on my eyes, feels like this is the speech that's given. And I didn't watch the video because I wanted to go in blind to get a blind reaction. So she just wrote out her speech that that I was reading earlier and that we just watched. And then she also has a technical press release for immediate release Thursday, the 9th. Jill Stein announces 2024 Green Party presidential run. And here goes. Jill Stein announced today that she is seeking the Green Party nomination for president of the United States. Stein is a Harvard-educated doctor, a pioneering environmental health advocate, and a longtime organizer for People, Planet, and Peace, says Stein of her mission in 2024, quote, "I'm running for president to offer a better choice for the people outside the failed two-party system. Will put a pro-worker, anti-war, climate emergency agenda front and center in this election and on the ballot in November." Stein's run comes at an unprecedented moment in modern electoral politics, with an unsettled electorate and a commanding majority of Americans expressing a desire for a presidential candidate outside of the duopoly. Let me pause here because it feels like I'm getting backed up with a lot of what I wanted to say about this, and I want to catch up before I continue on here. And that is, so let's kind of go back. Before Marianne Williamson announced, the discussion in a lot of left-leaning radical circles was like, of course we're not supporting Joe Biden. And it was always a pie in the sky sort of thing. We wish we had Jill Stein again. Or Jill Stein would tweet about Joe Biden and the race or the system or the duopoly, and it would always be, "I wish you would run again, Jill Stein." Always in the thread. And I remember saying this in one of the interviews we did with her. I was telling her that, excuse me. And so moving along in the story, Marianne Williamson enters the race. And of course, RBN, we are totally against that. And we showed that from the jump, completely, in our opinion, estimation, destroying her candidacy or making it effectively incapable of moving anywhere, going anywhere than where it is now. And then RFK Jr. joins the race. And it takes the oxygen. I would say it would take 75% of the oxygen out of the Marianne Williamson campaign. Then Cornel West enters the race. And now Marianne Williamson has been completely put outside of the room of candidates. Nobody talking about her. When Cornel West enters a race, Nick and I many times literally had conversations similar, if not exactly. We couldn't think of a candidate that would be better than Dr. Jill Stein until we came across Cornel West. Like, wow, we could not think of a better candidate until we thought of Cornel West. Check the boxes, Harvard. Check the boxes, accepted by the establishment, brings them on their cable news networks all the time. Check the box, what wake up people who never vote would vote for, would join his movement or his candidacy and vote for the first time. Lupe Fiasco, for example, was one. He said, this will be the first and only time I vote. Tweeted that out when Cornel West announced. Cornel West moved to the Green Party. And I'm sorry, let me make sure I make this statement. Before he moves to the Green Party, we do a show, the post-duopoly show. And this is one of our third or fourth episodes. We do a post-duopoly show. And that announcement that he's running under the People's Party was made that same day. So we all, and I remember Keaton and I was pushing it so hard. It was like, nah, he's like, we need to focus on pressuring him to leave the People's Party and join the Green Party. And literally within less than 48 hours, that was the news, what we were reporting, that he was leaving. So we were happy. In a very happy place. Some even suggested who should be Cornel West's running mate. Jill Stein. Jill Stein, I'm not running. She has a lot on her plate. She had a lot of other things going on. Maybe we'll get to that. She had a lot of other things going on, including issues that was still carried over from the 2016 campaign. Yeah, 2016 campaign. And I thought that would be a great ticket to have Cornel West and Dr. Jill Stein. I'm not sure I disagree with that even now. That a ticket where Dr. Jill Stein and Cornel West would be great, but at least now I'm thinking Dr. Jill Stein needs to be at the top of the ticket, considering the things that Cornel West have did, the decisions he has made. He needs to be the second in command. He needs to be Robin, not the Batman. His name recognition will help because Dr. Jill Stein's name recognition is here, but Cornel West's name recognition is slightly above because his name recognition rings truer or larger, not truer, larger in the Black community at least. So he would help in that sense. So I think this is still a possibility. Now, my first choice, though, would be for her to tap her 2016 VP running mate, Ajamu Baraka. Because I'm trying to think the Green Party needs to find a way of pulling Black voters to the Green Party. That's why I think Cornel West, he has a larger name recognition. But policy-wise, for me, my first choice would be Ajamu Baraka or even a Margaret Kimberly. I don't know if she would consider running. I don't know if Ajamu would consider running. But Dr. Jill Stein, this would be a great way to move the party forward if Cornel West was to come back as a VP running mate or Ajamu Baraka is added, or maybe a name that for whatever reason I can't even think of right now, because and the reason I'm saying all of this is to come back to this letter now, because where it says here, we're in a special time here. Where is it? Oh, right here. Where did it mention? Did I skip over it? Right here. Stein's run comes at an unprecedented moment in modern electoral politics. This is what a Jamu Baraka, this is what Shama Sawant, this is what Margaret Kimberly. It didn't feel like Cornel West understood the moment we in. Like, oh, it's just be another time. No, it's not. This is a very unique moment where we have so many very earth-shattering sort of events happening all at one time. With all those things happening, the establishment providing two turds on a platter to fix all of these converging, life-altering, converging sort of events. And these events could be life-altering by themselves. Now we're adding them all together. I mean, to go from the pandemic to go to inflation to now we're talking about war with Russia, war with China, war in Israel. This is an unprecedented time. So let's get back. And so I agree with what she says here. Let's get back here. So Jill Stein's run comes at an unprecedented moment in modern electoral politics, with an unsettled electorate and a commanding majority of Americans expressing a desire for a presidential candidate outside of the duopoly. According to a recent Gallup poll, quote, 63% of U.S. adults currently agree with the statement that the Republican and Democratic parties do such a poor job of representing American people that a third major party is needed. This represents a 70% point increase from a year ago, and it is the highest since Gallup first asked the question back in 2023. So we have an historic poll in 20 plus years, 21 years to be exact, just lends itself to the point that I was making before, that this is an unprecedented time that we're in. Quote, with the war machine swallowing trillions of dollars as working people struggle to survive and the climate crisis accelerate, it's time to offer voters a viable alternative to the bought-off politicians who have thrown them under the bus, Stein said. Quote, the ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both Democrats and Republicans have betrayed us, their promises again and again. Political insiders always smear outsiders like us and try to shame voters who want better choices, Stein said. Quote, but without freedom of choice in elections, there is no democracy. It's time to offer the American people a real choice on their ballot, independent of the failed establishment, end quote. And I'm just realizing this has 2024 is shaping up to be the election where we have the most legitimate choices in the general election. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Jill Stein on the Green Party, that's a legitimate. That's 40 plus states they will be on. 40 plus. Now let's talk a little bit about RFK Jr. and Cornel West and why both of them are running independent, but they're both not running. They're both not the same. It's not the same independent candidacy. Cornel West is running an independent candidacy with no money or very little money, so little you might as well describe it as no money. You know how when you have $15 in the bank account, somebody says, "You got money? How much money you got?" I'm broke. You don't say $15. So Cornel West's campaign is a campaign independent with no money, which means if he's polling at 8%, 8% of zero is what? Why it's different from an independent candidacy of RFK is because RFK is actually raising millions of dollars. RFK Jr. is actually getting money. And RFK Jr. polling at 25% in the general election. Haven't seen numbers like that from a third-party candidacy since Ross Perot. That means he's going to get even more people to back him. Even corporate. I don't think he's sworn off corporate money. And the way he's going so hard at genocidal, advocating for genocidal Israel, he's likely to get donors. So that's why it's RFK independent candidacy is a lot different than Cornel West's independent candidacy. Now I say all of that to get back to what to what's on the screen and what I was saying. 2024 is shaping up to where we have the most legitimate candidates on the ballot, and that's 4. I do not include Cornel West for the reason I just said. 8%, polling at 8% in the general election, 8% of 0 is what? RFK Jr., Jill Stein, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, or whoever they insert in place of Joe Biden. So I can't remember a time where we had legitimate choices where there could quite possibly be people who have millions of dollars or the ability of raising millions of dollars or have an apparatus like the case of Jill Stein and the Green Party to get on 35, 40 plus ballots. I don't see how any way Joe Biden is going to win the election, especially with the latest polling showing that in 4 of 6 states, he is losing to Donald Trump outside of the margin of error. There's another state where he's losing to Donald Trump, but it's within the margin of error. But let's get back to the letter here. I'm sorry, the tweet. Dr. Jill Stein unveiled a campaign website at jillstein2024.com, laying out the campaign's vision to solve the key crises of our time, crushing inequality, endless wars, and climate collapse. Quote, when we stand together, we can provide living wage jobs for all Americans, she said. Stein said, quote, we can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, health care, housing, food, education, and more. We can abolish student debt and medical debt. We can create a Green New Deal with millions of jobs to fight the climate crisis and protect Mother Earth. We can ensure the constitutional rights, freedoms, and justice for all. We can end endless wars and rampant militarism. We can use diplomacy and international law to end violence, occupation, and apartheid. We can build real democracy to empower the people. We do have the power, and we can use it in this election to start building an America and a world that works for all of us. And that is her press release. Let's see what some people are saying here. Let's see what sort of reactions she's getting. Oh, wow. Nick is the first one to react here. RBN brother Nick here. I'm going to read that in just a second. Yeah. Let me pop this up. Please interview PSL, and that's the Party for Socialism and Liberation presidential candidate Claudia de la Cruz, about her and other anti-war activist protests today in Black Rock, New York City headquarters. Janice, that is something we can absolutely attempt to reach out to her to get her on for that. So thank you, Janice. And thank you for the super chat, super sticker there, Biden 71. All right, so let's get back to the reaction. And RBN brother Nick's reaction is up first. We are in the early stages of a multi-party era. Reject the duopoly, embrace what's happening. And this, I absolutely love this. And this is sort of what I was saying earlier, that this is the first time we're going to have more than just 3. Because we had Ross Perot and he was a legitimate person. Now it's 4. And the way RFK Jr. is polling and his ability to raise money makes him a legitimate contender. And they're finally admitting this on cable news. I might play the clip. It's not related story. It's from a related story. But I may play the clip where they talk about it. And then we have Jill Stein, by way of what the Green Party's apparatus has built up. If she wins the nomination, 40 plus ballots. So Nick is right. We're entering into a post-duopoly era, and where it's a multi-party era, and it can only get better after this. Because how can we go backwards after the people see, wow, we have 4 legitimate choices here? And the way I would put them on the spectrum is, of course, Jill Stein is way out in the left. Then I guess you would have RFK Jr. Then Trump and Biden are really overlapping. And I would say RFK Jr. is closer to them than he is to Dr. Jill Stein. But another ramification of this news from Dr. Jill Stein is Marianne Williamson is going to become even more invisible, if that's even possible. If that's even possible, Marianne Williamson is going to become even more invisible than she already is. And I think there is a clip. I won't give too much. Let me just bring up the clip. There is a clip, or let me say it this way. She goes on Rising, of course. And I think the segment she does, and I'm only going off the title, I haven't watched the segment, is DNC is rigged. Bernie was right, says 2024 challenger. So she reaches out to her friend, Brianna Joy Gray, to get some help here. Because I am being completely... But she is completely now going to be completely invisible if she wasn't already. It's going to even be worse than it was.
Make to Bernie Sanders. I had long dismissed his complaints about the rigged Democratic Party primary system, but you know what? He was right, and I apologize. Bernie, voter suppression, New Hampshire candidate suppression, ballot access, and debate suppression. None. If you're among the majority of Democrats who want to change, please go to dean24.com and help us create change.
Dean Phillips also came for Biden following Tuesday's countrywide elections. He wrote, "Want evidence of the disconnect between the D.C. political industrial complex and X and the exhausted majority of Americans? In an exit poll of Ohioans who voted to make abortion and cannabis legal, only 25% said that Joe Biden should run for re-election." Well, this has to be a welcome admission in your view as a former Bernie Sanders staffer to see someone admit that he was right about the suppression?
No, figuring this out only now when it personally benefits you is just an admission of how selfish, craven, indifferent to the millions of people across the country who were joined together in a movement for universal health care, a living wage, housing as a human right, fighting for their actual survival for those 2 candidacies of Bernie Sanders. He didn't care enough to inquire as to why so many people would have been motivated to make a socialist the second most viable candidate in the race. Someone who came out of nowhere to almost beat Hillary Clinton and get 44% of the vote in 2016. But I guess now that it impacts him, he's figured it out. He's seen the light. God bless.
I would just take the win, but we're different people.
How is it a win? It's very easy.
When people start agreeing with you, you say,
no, it's
thank
very,
you,
it's
you're
very
right.
easy to compliment someone when they're.
I was waiting for that. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's freaking hilarious. Oh, that's freaking hilarious. But Dean Phillips here is, I guess, making the point, not I guess, he's like, you heard what Brianna said, is making the point that, yeah, Bernie Sanders was right. The Dems are rigging this election. And Robbie is like, I guess you won't take the win, because I guess Robbie's saying Dean Phillips is saying, yeah, he's saying, yeah, you're right, Bernie Sanders, but Bree takes a little bit of offense, I guess. Let's listen.
When they're out of power and when there's no implications. We see this every time. When there's not a Democrat in the White House, when Democrats don't have the chambers of Congress, what do we see? A lot of big, bold speechifying from the progressives in Congress who talk about, we need a minimum wage, we need a Medicare for all, we need to fight, it's all Trump's fault, it's all the Republicans' fault. Then the second there's no way to offshore blame on the Republican Party. Have you heard a peep from any of those progressives about any of those issues that they said were life and death issues when Trump was in office? Have you seen AOC crying at the border wall?
I don't think he said he was a progressive and that he
office?
agrees with every single Biden or Bernie policy under the sun, just that Bernie was mistreated by the process.
Right.
And now it's wrong.
Right. And there were stakes to making that kind of a claim in prior election cycles. There's no stakes for anyone but him to make.
So I take Bree's Bree's point, and maybe I'll show you Marianne Williamson's tweet later, where she's complaining about being invisible. So maybe I'll bring up the tweet later. But let's get back to one of the videos I wanted to show you. Since I'm here on Twitter, since I'm here on YouTube, before I go back to Twitter, I wanted to show a couple of other videos with Dr. Jill Stein. Here is one I wanted to show because obviously they're going to come after her again, that she's a spoiler since she's entering the race. So I think it's just fitting to have her address this again. And she recently addressed it with Forbes magazine, I believe.
You told Time magazine recently.
Not this one. With Forbes magazine, I believe. And it's this one right here. Yeah, Forbes. So she went on Forbes to do an interview as the campaign manager for Cornel West.
In 2000 and in
2016,
2016, the Green Party was accused of tipping the scales in the election to.
Give it a second. It'll catch up.
Republicans. So first, what's your response when people say to you, assign some responsibility to you for Hillary Clinton's loss? Do you hold any of that responsibility?
Absolutely not. And I think the notion that votes belong to the political parties because of what? Just because they happen to be the elephant in the room, so they own our votes, we have to justify as voters. I think voter shaming is dead wrong, and it's extremely counterproductive. And I think voters really resent being told how they have to vote. Democrats and Republicans and Greens, everybody has to earn our votes. Nobody owns our votes. That's just antithetical to the basic idea of democracy. Now, if you just look at the numbers themselves, exit polls were very clear in 2016 that Green voters, people who voted Green, largely would not have come out to vote had myself and Ajamu Baraka not been there as an option. So this is what you would call cherry picking the data. It's pure cherry picking when people try to make these voter shaming arguments or try to blame 2016 or even 2000 on third parties. Third party votes in 2016 amounted to something like 1.4 million. if you look at libertarian votes, they were somewhere around 3.5 million. And if you were arbitrarily assigning all those libertarian votes to a Republican, if there was a consistent analysis applied here, then Trump's victory would have been even bigger. So it's just laughable. I think that power tries to concoct this this very shady, ridiculous argument in order to try to shame its competition and to basically eliminate its competition. Democracy has to be about a competition of political ideas. That's what
competition of political ideas. I wanted to play that because inevitably she will be asked this question over and over, and I wonder how this is going to play out, because you have RFK Jr., who really, depending on what poll he could take some from Joe Biden, he could take from Donald Trump, and maybe it's just an even taken from even. And then you toss in Dr. Jill Stein, who will bring in new voters. And RFK Jr., I believe, he will also bring in new voters, people who wouldn't normally vote. So this is going to be a very, very interesting election. Let's go back to Twitter now and round out this segment and get to our regular stories now. Let's go here. So let's show you the Marianne Williamson tweet here. So let's read. It's a thread. It's a thread. So Trump is further ahead in the Republican field than Biden is in the Democratic. Nikki Haley is lower in the polls than I am, yet she is not called a long shot every time her name is mentioned. Why? Because she's one of the clubs. While I disagree with her politics, I like her, by the way. The person, the unhinged warmonger, she likes, by the way, but she continues. The political media elite manufactures derision, as well as consent, ensuring to the best of their ability that no one is considered qualified for higher office except those whose training is in maintaining and perpetuating the system as it is. The qualification most needed at this time is not the ability to drive the car that drove us into the ditch. It's the ability to drive us out of the ditch. The problem is not that we lack political car mechanics. The problem is that we are on the wrong road. The political media industrial complex does not want any one platform in this contest who is willing to say that, because when people actually hear it, the gig is up. I see it every day. What people see versus what the system does not want them to see. I'm telling you, people are seeing it anyway. This is her rant for not getting the same exposure that other candidates get who are in worse positions than she is. And it's because no one takes you seriously because you're not a serious candidate. I mean, you've adjusted your political beliefs based on bad interviews given. Palestine is one you try to adjust, and now you're real silent on Palestine, trying to position yourself as one of those, like a Rashida Tlaib. I wonder how she calls for a ceasefire, though. I wonder how she calls. But anyway, back to the main part of the story. This is just part of the story I wanted to include, was this part here. So let's go back to the item here. Was there one more that I missed? I think I covered it all. Let's just look and see if there's any latest news, since this just dropped, on Jill Stein before we close this segment. Is this a different one? Here we go. This is a new one. I want to speak to the massacre now taking place before our eyes in Gaza. We call for an investigation of Netanyahu's regime's war crimes, as well as the role Biden and U.S. leaders is aiding and abetting them. And above all, these crimes must stop. So this is her video now on what's happening in Gaza. Let's listen.
I want to speak to the massacre now taking place before our eyes in Gaza. I speak as someone who deplores violence in all its forms and condemns violence against civilians of any nation. The war crimes being perpetrated by Netanyahu against Palestinians, however, are in a league of their own and have reached genocidal proportions, with Palestinians denied food, water, medicine, and electricity, while being relentlessly bombed as they're forced to flee their homes, running for their lives. President Biden and bipartisan leaders are not only complicit, they are full partners in Netanyahu's war crimes, supplying the bombs raining down on Gaza, the airplanes dropping them, the aircraft carriers defending the Israeli military, $10 million a day to strengthen the IDF, and propaganda to run political interference. The U.S. role in blocking a UN ceasefire resolution is absolutely unforgivable. We call for an investigation of the Netanyahu regime's war crimes, as well as the role of Biden and U.S. leaders in aiding and abetting them. And above all, these crimes must stop now. As a Jew who grew up just after the Holocaust, with relatives who fled pogroms and a grandfather named Israel, I take never.
You know, my mama always told me things happen for a reason. And Cornel West announces Peter Dow as his campaign manager. I'm sorry, let me back up. Cornel West goes on Jimmy Dore show and becomes an advocate for lesser two evil. Cornel West then hires Peter Dow. Peter Dow runs the Cornel West campaign into a delusional crash. Jill Stein takes over as the candidate running the Green Party. Jill Stein is Jewish, and what is the top story that's going on right now and will be going on for the foreseeable future? The war with Israel. Now, what sort of gravity does a Jewish person have speaking against the atrocities of Israel? So it almost makes her as a candidate better positioned specifically for what's happening right now. Things happen for a reason, like my mama always says. So this could be a gift, actually, that Cornel West's jazz man trait of ad-libbing and making crazy ass, stupid ass decisions got him out of this candidacy and got this person a better positioned person, specifically because she's Jewish. And listen to what she says about her Jewish heritage.
For their lives. President Biden and bipartisan leaders are not only complicit, They are full partners in Netanyahu's war crimes, supplying the bombs raining down on Gaza, the airplanes dropping them, the aircraft carriers defending the Israeli military, $10 million a day to strengthen the IDF, and propaganda to run political interference. The US role in blocking a UN ceasefire resolution is absolutely unforgivable. We call for an investigation of the Netanyahu regime's war crimes, as well as the role of Biden and US leaders in aiding and abetting them. And above all, these crimes must stop now. As a Jew who grew up just after the Holocaust, with relatives who fled pogroms and a grandfather named Israel, I take never again seriously, and that means never again for anyone. For all those reasons, we demand a ceasefire.
She has a grandfather named Israel. She grew up right after the Holocaust. Things happen for a reason.
A ceasefire, an end to the blockade, humanitarian and medical relief, release of hostages and political prisoners, and an end to occupation and apartheid. This is the only path to peace and security for us all.
That's Dr. Jill Stein, everybody. Let's see what else. This is why I searched the latest. And thank you, Nick, posting another one. Dr. Jill Stein has announced she's running for president in 2024. Remember when Stein ran and got 7%? Then the establishment freaked out, Russia-gated her, and began their smear campaign against third parties. The multi-party era is upon us. And that's you can see the receipt here, that picture, CNN. ORC poll, Stein gets 7% amongst registered voters. So thank you, Nick, for that receipt. Let's see. We got that one. That's Peter Dowd. Man, that's a piece of shit. Dr. Jill Stein announced her campaign on X less than an hour ago, and the still with her shit libs already melting down. Let me see, Nick. Let me see if anybody's saying anything about it. Maybe I should go latest. Oh yeah, somebody saying still with her. Still with her. Yeah, the hashtag is back, everybody. Because of Jill Stein, the hashtag is back. Just absurd. All right, let's see if there's any other sort of important receipts that it needs to be added to this story before we move here. No, I think that's it. I think that is it. I don't see anything else. All right, so this is where we're gonna close the story on Dr. Jill Stein. I'm happy she's running. I told her she should run. When Cornel West dropped out, I said she should run. Yeah, so I think she should run, and I'm happy that she's running. So there you go. All right, I'm gonna throw this story in before I get to one of the main stories, and that's the Glenn Greenwald took to Carlson, and I mean it's a lot of big stories today. So, but let's move to this story right here, just briefly. And it's New York declares $75 million to police. Sorry, let me say that again. And Aaron, you can start here. New York dedicates 70 million. Start whenever you want. New York dedicates 75 million to police expanding surveillance of university protesters. Governor Holcomb announcement of expanded police funding for surveillance is aligned with the similar new initiatives from the Biden administration and university leaders. So this is what the new way of combating free speech and pro-Palestinian protests. And I'll read a snippet from the article. Governor Holcomb announced more than 75 million in new funding for the police, primarily for new surveillance technology and surveillance program staff to be used against pro-Palestinian protesters and activists under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism. This move comes 5 days after the U.S. Senate unanimously passed a resolution condemning campus activism for Palestinians or Palestine as pro-Hamas and pro-terrorism. 1 day after the Biden administration also announced new support for surveillance programs, especially for use at colleges and universities, and 1 day after more than 100 university presidents and other high-level administrators formed a national coalition in support of Israel, blaming Hamas for the suffering of Palestinians rather than the IDF, which are actively bombing and laying siege to Gaza. This article is on the Left Voice, and I do want to read maybe a tad bit more of this. So let's bring the full article into the screen here. There's a headline again, and let me just get here. I read that part. That was the part I just read. Now, let's get to the part where we left off. It also comes 1 day after Biden's press secretary compared pro-Palestinian protesters to the white supremacists, anti-Semitic protesters in Charlottesville at the 2017 Unite the Right rally. Holcomb's announcement also includes provisions for a judge to review policies and procedures related to anti-Semitism at the City University of New York. This increased police spending is part of a united and concentrated attack by all levels of government against political speech at universities and against the movement for a free Palestine. What do Holcomb's orders mean? Let's be clear. These surveillance programs are not about protecting Jewish students or fighting actual anti-Semitism, but are about surveilling Arab and Muslim students to create a climate of fear designed to silence critics of Israel and U.S. interests abroad. Indeed, many Jewish people are actively participating in the pro-Palestinian protests. In fact, anti-Zionist Jewish protesters are also being attacked and targeted by Israel's supporters for siding with Palestine. These attacks on pro-Palestinian activists are happening because the media and the ruling class have managed to create the perception that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism and that any support of Palestinians is an inherent threat to Jewish people, as if the two are incompatible of coexisting. Because these governments' actions are framed using the language of anti-Semitism, those who oppose them will be called anti-Semitic. But increasing police power, especially surveillance power, is a threat to all oppressed people. And again, this article is on the Left Voice. just a brief article I wanted to make sure I cover today. Let me put the, what is it called? The URL to that article in the description box. It is in the description box. It's saving. It's there now. You can go and click the article and read it for yourself or save it, whatever you want to do with it. So let's now get into another part of, or I'm sorry, another segment. And we're going to go back to Twitter. You call it X, I guess. How about I call it Twitter, newly called X? How about I call it, is that better? Because I usually say formerly, but I like it better the other way. Let's now go to Max Blumenthal, State Department. And then we'll go to the Tucker Carlson thing. And then Anna, I forgot we got so much stuff to cover. So let's set this up the right way. Let me get the title. Do I have a title? I do have a title set up here. Max Blumenthal destroys. So Aaron, actually, let's see where we're at. But this is some glorious stuff that Max Blumenthal has put together. But we are at 263 likes. We've had 900 people come through and watch, so potentially we can get up to 900 likes easily. But how about we just shoot for 400? 400 likes. That is the new target. We have already surpassed the first target, so let's get to 400. Let's get to 400 likes is the new target, and 900 people have come through here. We've peaked at 4 something. All right, so there we go. Here we go. Let's get to this story now with Max Blumenthal. And you can start here, Aaron. So Max Blumenthal destroys the State Department in this tweet. And let me read the caption, actually, before I play the video. This is from the Gray Zone. The Gray Zone's Max Blumenthal asks the State Department why Tony Blinken and Joe Biden have accused nations of genocide, which have killed far less than Israel has in Gaza in 1 month. And if the Biden administration has enabled Israel's killing spree with its use of the term human shields. So there's Max Blumenthal. Let's bring his video up.
And in March 2021, Secretary Blinken accused China of the crime of genocide for its alleged treatment of the Uyghur minority.
I'm sorry, the video took the audio played faster than the video was ready to show. So now let's play.
And in March 2021, Secretary Blinken accused China of the crime of genocide for its alleged treatment of the Uyghur minority, but he didn't accuse them of killing on any mass scale or forcible transfer. Now we see with Israel's military assault on Gaza, something like 1 out of every 200 people in the Gaza Strip has been eliminated. Over 4,000 children killed. The Ministry of Intelligence, as Sam pointed out, in Israel has published a blueprint for the forced transfer of the entire Palestinian population to Egypt. We have the intent to commit genocide expressed at the highest level of the Israeli government, including Netanyahu himself referring to the Palestinian population as Amalek, the biblical Amalek. So I wonder, when you're accusing one country of genocide without accusing them of mass killing, and then blocking ceasefires to enable another country's military assault, what metric are you using to determine genocide, or is this just political rhetoric?
This is why Nick calls Max good at debating, because what Max is good at is word selection. He's good at a lot of writers, a lot of journalists, they use too many words to say what they want to say. They're overly descriptive. But he's the type of writer that is more surgical in precision, such few words, but gets right to the point. So when you use fewer words to get to a point, it feels more like a jab. Figuratively, it feels like a jab. So that's what it feels like. This question here, and I'm going to back it up a little bit and let him say it again.
Israeli government, including Netanyahu himself, referring to the Palestinian population as Amalek, the biblical Amalek. So I wonder, when you're accusing one country of genocide without accusing them of mass killing, and then
accusing one country of genocide without accusing them of mass killing. You're committing a genocide, but you're not accusing them of mass killing, but somehow it equates to being a genocide to you, State Department.
And blocking ceasefires to enable another country's military assault. What metric are you using?
So, on one hand, this one country A has a lower body count, but you're accusing them of genocide. On another hand, this other country has a higher body count. You won't accuse them of genocide, and you're blocking the ceasefire. So what exact metric are you using to determine what a genocide is? Great question.
Using to determine genocide, or is this just political rhetoric?
It's certainly not political rhetoric. The department, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, we have a rigorous process in place for evaluating whether something constitutes as genocide or not. And that is true in any country that that situation might be being looked at. That is not a term that we have assessed pertains to this current conflict. We are, of course, monitoring the evolving situation and are examining facts as they develop. This continues to be an incredibly challenging and fraught situation, but it's also important to remember that Hamas bears responsibility for sparking this war. They have brought this tragic war to Gaza.
Okay, well, President Biden has accused the Russian government of genocide for its actions in Ukraine, where in 2 years it has killed as many civilians as Israel has killed in 1 month in the Gaza Strip. So how do you account for that disparity where you're assisting one country?
Oh my God, Howard. That's what I'm saying. You see how he on the fly is able to pick exact words, not be under descriptive, but just be precisely enough descriptive with the right amount of words. It feels like a jab. You get what I'm saying? It feels figuratively like a jab to the gut. And I know this guy who's taking this question, I know he's feeling like, good God damn it.
2 years, it has killed as many civilians as Israel has killed in 1 month in the Gaza Strip. So how do you account for that disparity where you're assisting one country and accusing the other of genocide when the country you're assisting has systematically killed so many more people?
The country you accuse the country who have killed less people, less civilians of genocide. How is that possible? This is just a great question. I'm going to go back even further because I just got to hear this again.
It's also
I'll let it play this time.
Hamas bears responsibility for sparking this war. They have brought this tragic war to Gaza.
Okay, well, President Biden has accused the Russian government of genocide for its actions in Ukraine, where in 2 years it has killed as many civilians as Israel has killed in 1 month in the Gaza Strip. So how do you account for that disparity where you're assisting one country and accusing the other of genocide when the country you're assisting has systematically killed so many more people in 1 month?
Those circumstances are totally and completely not the same. And to make a comparison like that, candidly, is incredibly inappropriate. We have been, please don't interrupt me. We have been, have raised directly with the Israeli government about the need to distinguish between.
What does that mean? Are you a god to where you can just say, you know what I mean? You're in a discussion. And you just say that just making the comparison is just ridiculous. That's the way the State Department, our government, gets out of answering the question. Materially. Answer, how is it, why the difference? You answer it materially, since it's such a ridiculous comparison.
Terrorists and Palestinians.
So let's see if he answers it materially.
To distinguish between Hamas terrorists and Palestinian civilians. This is something that the secretary has raised directly on his travels. We even laid out that we believe that there are commitments that can be made additionally on dealing with protecting civilian life more effectively. And we're watching very closely to make sure that happens.
You referred to Palestinian civilians as human shields. Doesn't that blur the distinction between civilians and militants?
We have not referred to Palestinian civilians as human shields. We have said that Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields. That is not hyperbole. That is something that we have seen Hamas do as they continue to integrate themselves into key civilian infrastructure across Gaza.
Wouldn't that be blurring the distinction?
Why are you moving side to side? Why are you unable to talk in complete sentences? See, the thing about human psychology, and this is why I lean so much on reading people, you have tales. And when you go from being questioned and you're talking like this with confidence, looking directly at somebody and speaking like this, speaking like that, you go from that to moving like this. And you keep pushing your glasses up. These are tales. And it's a tale that you're uneasy with this position because you know you're talking in circular logic that nobody who has a half a brain believes. If you are right, if you feel you're in the right position, this is not the demeanor you have.
Between civilians and militants?
I am not. We have not referred to Palestinian civilians as human shields. We have said that Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields. That is not hyperbole. That is something that we have seen Hamas do as they continue to integrate themselves into key civilian infrastructure across Gaza.
Wouldn't that be blurring the distinction between civilians and combatants if you say Hamas is using civilians as human shields? Wouldn't that be in some ways justifying the killing of civilians because they happen to be in the way, in their homes?
There is no one in this administration that is justifying killing of civilians. Any civilian life loss is incredibly troubling, heartbreaking to us. Any number above zero is deeply troubling to us. What we are doing is we are working with our Israeli partners to ensure that steps can be taken to minimize the impact on civilian life. And we also have believe that there is a moral imperative, there is a strategic imperative to take steps to minimize loss of civilian life. I'm going to work through them. I've answered like 4 of your questions.
I wish Max was in there, Aaron was in there, Wyatt was in there, Lee Camp was in there, just to ask these questions. And I don't know if he just decided to wanting to get into these news conferences or he's just recently got approved, but this is great that the gray zone has been in these State Department news conferences to get some questions asked. And Max Blumenthal made the most of this time being there with this question about this. And because of the split that this issue of Palestine has presented for the Democratic Party, they can't be flippant about it, even in this setting. They have to at least pretend And this is why he had to act like, oh no, any human loss of life above 0, really? Because there's over 3,000 kids that have been murdered. So whatever you're doing isn't good enough if your threshold is 0 and we're at 10,000 if we're talking about the total killed. So, but great work by great work by Max Blumenthal. Here's a super chat related to the segment. Oh no, Fat Sagar is back. That's not funny. That's not funny. Let me put it that way. That is not funny. That's pretty funny. Here's another super chat. Biden is not going to be the candidate. It will definitely be Michelle Obama, and that's Freddie the Fish. I don't know if it'd be Michelle. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Gavin Newsom. If they really wanted to win, they would run Michelle. If they ran Michelle, they would win the White House. For sure. I don't know if the United States government knows how to operate with 2 presidents in the White House, because if Michelle Obama actually won the presidency, kid you not, Barack Obama will be sitting in on some of those briefings. He's a president. He will be sitting in on some of those briefings. So that'll be an interesting dynamic to have. But again,
and in March
Max Blumenthal,
Secretary
and let me
Blinken accused China of the crime of genocide for its alleged treatment of the Uyghur minority.
Let me just get some just show you a couple of reaction of this great interaction with Max. There goes BJG, Brianna Joy Gray. Good on Max for this line of questioning. That's BJG. I don't know Lauren. I'm trying to get people I know. Maybe this person. I don't know him personally. I think I retweeted him. No career or paycheck is worth being that man at the State Department podium. Spot on. Not enough money to have me going out there selling my soul. Scott Horton, State Department spokesman, has got to be the most humiliating job in the world. I would rather work with the decent dudes clearing sewerage. Here, the great Max Blumenthal makes a ridiculous, whiny squirm under the weight of his insane contradictions. And I could not, that he's just summed up what I was trying to say. Why the guy clearly looks uncomfortable in this setting of talking about the Palestinian issue or Palestinian struggle. Let's move on to the next part of this, because we still got some big sort of stories to cover, and I guess I can go here with this one. And this is a new one I had to add, and that is Destiny. Dan Cohen, who we've had on the show many times, and just recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, I'll probably have him on within the next 2 weeks. I would imagine he's going to be on again. Destiny asked for somebody. Now, I don't know Destiny as much as only to know that through Nick that he's somebody who debates. So Destiny put out a tweet, hey, anybody want to come on and conversate with him about, I guess, the Israel-Palestine conflict? Dan Cohen, this is the wrong guy to bring on your show. Now, maybe Destiny didn't know who he was, but Dan is not the right guy to bring on, like a Max. I put Dan and Max up there at the same. They have so much knowledge that they're able to reach back and get out of their brain. It's not the right person you would want to debate. This is what Dan says. I just humiliated Destiny, I think that's his Twitter, Destiny, on his own stream so hard that he rage quit when I showed his audience the time he called for a genocide of Palestinians. And he didn't want them to see that. Now, let's go back. This is the tweet. He says, hey, I'm streaming to 10,000 people for the next few hours. If you want to hop on and chat about this, I love to have the conversation. I lean pro-Israel. Dan Cohen just DM'd me a way to contact you. So he said, because Dan replied. He goes on. Now, let's see. This
you don't
is
know
where
anything about Zionism.
Now, this is not the entire debate, of course, but this is what it evolves to, apparently. So this is the last 3.5 minutes of it. Let's listen to Dan versus Destiny.
You don't know anything about Judaism. You don't know anything about Zionism. And you're a YouTuber who lives in your living room. And that's how you make your living. I am a journalist.
Lord.
I actually have skin in the game. I go.
Oh, Lord. He come in blazing. Well, again, this is at the end, so he didn't come in like this. But for me, this was my introduction to the debate.
You don't know anything about Judaism. You don't know anything about Zionism. And you're a YouTuber who lives in your living room. And that's how
why Dan, and for that matter, Max is also effective when debating or challenging somebody on the Palestine-Israel thing is because both of them are Jewish. Both of them are reporters. And for Dan, for that matter, I know Max have been there too, but Dan actually lived there for a year, 7 months, 3 years, 7 months in Gaza. So it's great. But let me see if I can get through this.
You don't know anything about Judaism. You don't know anything about Zionism. And you're a YouTuber who lives in your living room. And that's how you make your living. I am a journalist. I actually have skin in the game. I go to places that I talk about.
Okay.
So I actually know what I'm talking about, unlike you.
Gotcha. So you think that Jews would feel safe in a one-state solution? You don't think they have any reason to feel like their rights would be infringed upon, programs would happen, explosions would
You keep
happen?
going back to this.
Well, because that's
you
the
hate
whole
democracy.
reason. I'm not
you
hating
hate democracy, dude.
I'm just trying to engage with
You're
what is a
against
realistic solution
democracy.
forward.
We've been through this like 10 times. You keep asking me the same thing.
Do you think
It's
that when you're
obvious you
in
don't
the
even know
Gaza
the
Strip and
basics
you're
of the whole
talking to other
situation?
Arabs there, do you think that they're happy that people like you are encouraging the violence to continue indefinitely so you can build journalistic careers on it? Like, does that make you feel good?
Oh,
I'm just curious, right? Like, how many people have you met that have died in the recent attacks, and you're out here like on the internet jerking off an unworkable solution that'll never happen because it gets you clicks? Like, it's disgusting.
Buddy,
you realize that, right? Can you admit that? You know that a one-state
Discord.
solution
All
will
you
never
are
happen,
is a
right?
streamer.
You understand
All
that
you are
do
is a
you
streamer.
acknowledge
You're
that
a
a
little
one-state
Nazi fascist
solution?
who just wants to
A
cheer on
Nazi
Benjamin
fascist,
Netanyahu.
all right.
No, you called for genocide. I have the clip right here. Why don't we play it? Why don't we play this clip?
Is that Are we?
where you
We're
said-
doing the clip farming now. I don't have
No,
to. I don't talk in
no,
clips. I
why
don't
don't we
exist
play
in
the
30-second
actual-
clips.
Why don't we play
Because
the
I don't
actual
exist
clip
in
where you
30-second
called for
clips. You have
genocide?
me right here.
No. Why don't we play it?
This is it. This is all
Why
it
don't
is.
we
It's the
play it?
clip
Why don't we
farming.
play it?
It's
Here,
the
you know
clip
what?
farming. Yeah.
No, this is you calling for genocide. Why don't we actually play it and show your audience? Because I know you tried to hide it from your stream so people couldn't actually see
Do we
it.
want to go
Let's
through
see.
your tweets where you're claiming U.S. Special Forces are in Israel on the Gaza border and it's literally pictures
They
of
are.
like LARPing military? Oh, do you have any evidence of that?
U.S. Special Forces are in Israel. You can look it up. On
I
the
didn't say in
Times
Israel. I said
Here,
on the
wait, wait.
Gaza border. You said they were on the
Let's
Gaza
listen to
border.
this.
and
No,
it's
he
on the
didn't
Gaza
wanna-
border.
Here's you calling for genocide.
So he didn't want to, because on StreamYard, what Dan did was share the video. But because it's Destiny's stream, Destiny has to prove it. He didn't approve it. So Dan goes to his phone. Oh, you don't want to do that? I'll just play it from my phone. Then he stops the stream.
Listen, I'm good, dude. If you want to talk in the
Are you
future,
gonna cut
let
me
me
off
know.
because I'm showing you?
Yeah,
talking
I'm not
about
gonna sit here and
genocide?
have you play clips
Are
to
you
me like
really? You're not
we're
gonna-
4
you're
years
not
old,
gonna
my
say
dude.
something about
Like, this is why I don't live in this world, because it's a bunch of milquetoast, privileged white boys like Vosh and Hassan in this space and can't take fucking heat. Like, just milquetoast. And milquetoast people just kind of turn me off. But anyway, Dan edits this clip, so he cuts him off in the stream. But Dan, smart enough, before he posts this clip of this debate, adds at the end of this clip, Destiny calling for genocide. He asked the actual clip that he was trying to play.
Like, if you don't want to engage with the subject matter, if you don't know anything about what's going on, if you just want to throw out like a bunch of weird like Zionist conspiracy theories, if you just want to sit here like talk about how the only possible solution is a one-state solution, that's fine.
Man, are you gonna tickle fucking
knock yourself out? Knock yourself out. I hope that the Russian paychecks are worthwhile. I hope
he's talking over so you can't hear it through the phone. That's some weak ass shit. But let's listen.
I hope you enjoy it. Have fun, my dude.
So now let's listen to the clip. And he goes, this is what it says. Here's the clip Destiny doesn't want you to see.
What do you think's the right move?
Honestly, I'm pro-genocide. Like, it sounds really shitty, but like, I think that Israel should just draw its fucking borders about where it is now, and basically, Palestinians can go live. In another place.
Maybe he didn't know who Dan was.
That's really shitty, but like, that's about where I'm at.
You just think that Palestine should just pack up and Native American the fuck out of there?
The problem is that it seems like there is a hugely general hostility to Jewish people across really the entire world, definitely the Middle East. So the problem is that as you weaken Israel's like ability for Jewish people to live there, it seems like because there's a lot of different organizations across the Middle East that are highly invested in the destruction of Israel. So that's like a really rough thing too. So it seems like if Israel is forced to make concessions to Palestinians, it threatens Jewish people's ability to have a homeland. And so I don't know. It's really shit. Truthfully, the answer is like there's no good answer.
So just genocide. I'm pro-genocide. Completely a Western colonial settler frame of thinking. It's, well, yeah, we did these people bad, and if we give them freedom, they're all going to come murder us possibly. So let's just commit a genocide. That's essentially the perspective of Destiny, which is the perspective of the United States has. Lots to get to. Still got Anna. Still got Rashida Tlaib censure. Damn, still got Fox. All right, so let's continue here. Wow, I do have a lot. But let's continue here. I do want to get using foreign wars to punish Americans. 10 minutes in, it must be.
To stand up and say, I'm not in support of what Israel is doing to the Palestinians.
Okay, so we're going to listen to a good chunk of this and then get to our other stories, like the Anna Kasparian story. That's another hot one that everybody's been wanting to talk about. Here it goes. Glenn Greenwald. Okay, so let's do another check. I'm going to do another check, but this is the next story. Glenn Greenwald goes on Tucker Carlson, and they talk about a bunch of different things, but we're going to zero in on right-wing hypocrisy over free speech in the Palestine issue and a little bit of Joe Biden. We're at 349 likes. Our target right now is 400. So we're getting close. Hit that like button on our way to our goal. Only 50 more. We've had over 1,000 people come through to watch us at some point. Thank you for coming through to watch us. Now, let's get to this next story. And Aaron, you can start here. So Glenn Greenwald goes on the Tucker Carlson show on X, formerly called Twitter, to talk about a lot of different things. And let's listen in to the conversation. We'll start as needed. Hang on a second here. This is where, okay, now I see it. Here we go.
the part of Americans, because now there's another foreign war that's always part of the equation, the domestic aspect to it, that vests more power in the government and takes away more and more rights from Americans.
What's so terrifying to me, though, is that the right, the American political right, which really was through this kind of weird transformation that's happened over the past dozen years, has become the lone defenders of the First Amendment. They've abandoned that in the last month, like instantly. So I think you could say.
So I should have prefaced it a little more. They're talking about free speech in the context of pro-Palestinian protest. So this was the old caption, and then I updated it because they do talk about the Ukraine war, but I decided to they're talking about free speech and okay, now I have it. Let me update that now. So it says Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson talk free speech and the right wing on Palestine protests, because that's what this conversation here is about. And let me back it up just a bit here to get the full conversation.
Is that the right, the American political right, which really was through this kind of weird transformation that's happened over the past dozen years, has become the lone defenders of the First Amendment. They've abandoned that in the last month, like instantly. So I think you could say, you know, I strongly support Israel. I strongly dislike Hamas. I'm rooting for, maybe I think we should commit troops to the region. I mean, whatever, you can have any view you want. However, American citizens have a right to express their opinion, period. And that supersedes any other event in any other country. It's like, that's a core right. And I don't hear many conservatives saying that. And so you sort of wonder, like, if they're not defending it, who will?
I mean, there are people who have built their careers, Tucker, over the last 5-6 years, standing up and saying, we can't have cancel culture. We can't have censorship. College students aren't entitled to feelings of safety. We don't censor in order to protect people from views they find threatening, mocking the notion that minority groups are vulnerable and we have to censor in order to protect them. Turn on a dime and now become the leading voices saying, because American Jews feel unsafe, that's valid in a way that, say, claims from Black people or LGBTs or Latinos aren't valid. And because of that, we need to censor. Fortunately, there have been some conservatives, influential ones, who have been quite consistent. Candace Owens, for example, had a very public argument with Megyn Kelly in which he was saying, we're not the left. We don't get people fired for their political views. We don't believe in using the law to silence people. There have been Vivek Ramaswamy on your show. He just wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal saying we're not going to defeat Hamas through censorship or cancel culture in the United States. And I think the biggest example and the most important one, which is Fire.org, that became very popular among conservatives in the United States because they were defending the rights of free speech on campuses for conservative students at a time when the ACLU wouldn't, stood up and vehemently denounced Ron DeSantis for a grave direct attack on the First Amendment when he tried to ban a pro-Palestinian group on campus on the grounds that they're providing material support for Hamas, even though he doesn't claim they did anything other than express their views. And I think this is the point. You are allowed to stand up in the United States and say, I think the United States should bomb Iran into oblivion. I think we should turn Gaza into a parking lot. Lindsey Graham stands up every day and calls for violence of that kind, and he's protected by the First Amendment from doing so. You also, though, as an American, are allowed to stand up and say, I think Israel is at fault in this conflict because of the occupation and the blockade. I think that people in Palestine have a right to fight back. I think that violence is justified because Israel has become repressive. You can think all those views are repulsive, but leave the question of what you think of those views to the side. No question, Americans have a right to express them. And there has been a concerted effort on the part of many conservatives, including many who have led the way in mocking claims of victimhood and victimhood narrative.
And what Glenn is saying here, all of you in our audience have witnessed, because I've covered how Fox News, and I've said many times on the Nick and CJ show, Fox News has been the one that's been in the forefront challenging this protest. Literally, Fox News was putting out 2-3 segments per day on YouTube. So if they're putting out 2-3 segments per day, that means they're doing 3 times that every day throughout their programming. So let's get back to the conversation. But to their point, I thought it was about free speech as a conservative, but Fox News is the one that's pushing censorship on college campuses the most, by far the most.
Narratives by minority groups and the idea that people need to feel safe. They are now the ones turning around and saying, no, because of how dangerous this speech is, we need to ban it. We need to ban these protests. We need to ban student groups. We need to put people on no hire lists. The exact kind of tactics they spent 5 or 6 years up until a month ago aggressively denouncing. And it's very dispiriting, even though it's not surprising, the minute that they have views that they find offensive for them to watch them and turn around and use all the same theories to say those views cannot be expressed. That is incredibly dangerous, because in the future, when conservatives want to complain about the censorship regime that has been implemented, who will possibly take them seriously after we just watched them, the minute there was an issue of great importance to them, which is Israel, turn around and call for censorship? Obviously, it's not a principle if the only time you defend free speech is when it comes to views you agree with. Anybody can do that. That's easy to do. That's worthless. The only real test of whether you believe in free speech is whether you defend the right to express the views you find most offensive. And a lot of conservatives, not all, are woefully failing that test.
I have to say, I am surprised. I was shocked by it. I am shocked by it. And I'm shocked not just by how little they care about freedom of expression, but also about the emotion involved. So for the past, 20 years, it's been a staple of demonstrations on college campuses to attack the United States. It's a garbage country. It was built on chattel slavery. It's fundamentally illegitimate. The New York Times devoted an entire year to telling us that the United States is a fundamentally racist country. And it's an immoral place, fundamentally, from its inception. And nobody said anything about it. Nobody stopped sending money to UPenn over that when they were attacking the US or white people, or none of that even registered with anybody. But the second a foreign country gets criticized, we got to shut it down. I mean, where's the concern for the United States? Or is that a stupid question?
Yeah, I mean, I had Mike Johnson on my show, the new Speaker of the House, 2 months ago, and I walked away with a somewhat positive impression. And yet I was amazed that, we have this ritual in the United States. It's not very common. We elect a new speaker. It's only happened 56 times in the whole history of our country. And the new speaker sends up this tribune and he gives a speech to try and tell Americans what his speakership will be about. And Mike Johnson had one opportunity to do that. And he said, the very first thing we're going to do. And Americans were like, what are you going to do for us? Are you going to end the fentanyl crisis? Are you going to keep drugs out of our country? Are you going to provide better jobs for us? Are you going to reindustrialize? He said, the very first thing we are going to do is pass a bill to help our friend Israel. That's the first thing we're going to do. And obviously, there are a lot of people in the United States who have great affinity for other countries. Rashida Tlaib has a Palestinian flag outside her office. A lot of people have the Ukrainian flag flying inside their house. And huge numbers of people have intense affinity for Israel, which is fine. You're allowed to have that. The problem becomes when you immediately abandon all of the principles that you claim to believe in defense of this foreign country. And the only reason, Tucker, I say that I wasn't surprised is because I have noted many times before that the American right does seem willing to give up free speech soon as the issue is Israel. I think one of the most disturbing set of laws that we have that were enacted mostly by red state governors and red state legislatures, and they've been invalidated by federal courts, thankfully, on the grounds that they violate free speech, but Andrew Cuomo did it too, are laws that say that if you want to work with the state, if you want to have a contract with our state, you have to sign a pledge vowing that you do not support a boycott of Israel.
So this is those laws that are against BDS. And as Glenn stated, they're primarily, or the majority of them, are in red states. So the so-called free speech warriors, and somebody in the audience, I think I put the comment up, is like, conservatives have never been about free speech. That's a mirage that they just like. They like to use free speech so we can be racist. But they're obviously not against or not for free speech, and it's proven and what Glenn is saying here about the anti-BDS laws, where and how they're primarily, or the majority of them, are in red states. Let's continue.
Otherwise, you are not hireable. You're allowed to support a boycott of any other country. You can boycott Peru, you can boycott South Korea or Russia or China, whatever other country you want to boycott, that's totally fine. Boycott that. You're even allowed to boycott other states in your own country. You're allowed to harm the economies and the businesses of your fellow citizens.
Own country.
And in fact, Andrew Cuomo, when he announced that he, by executive order, that if you support a boycott of Israel, you can't get hired by the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, the very same one, issued by executive order boycotts of Indiana and North Carolina on the grounds that they had enacted bathroom bills for trans people that he found offensive. So there were a lot of red states and red state governors enacting these laws that say, if you want to work with the state, you're free to boycott any other country or any other state in the United States. You just can't boycott Israel. And there's been a lot of those kinds of that tolerance for that sort of thing, because obviously the United States is a very pro-Israel country, and it's a winning political issue among a lot of American Jews, but also a ton of American evangelicals or just national security hawks. And there has been tolerance for erosion of free speech in the name of Israel before, but nowhere to the extent that we're now seeing. And I agree that the severity of it is surprising.
I would like to think there's an even bigger constituency for pro-America, but there doesn't seem to be, at least it's not represented in the Congress. So I have to ask.
So now, I can kind of give my last words on this part, because they're about to move to Joe Biden. And it's good that a person like Tucker Carlson is saying what he's saying, calling out right-wing people who all of a sudden aren't free speech warriors. Because he said in the last couple of months, now they're all of a sudden not free speech warriors. Coming with the Uhuru African socialist group, and now with the pro-Palestinian protests. Now, it would be better if he was getting this message out on Fox News. It would reach a lot more people, or maybe not. We'll see how many this episode gets as far as views, but it just came out. 59 million views already. So wow. So it's getting, I guess not. So he's reaching maybe the same amount of people, but maybe a different crop of people. So this is what Glenn said about the interview. I spoke here to Tucker Carlson about the war in Ukraine, the predictable abandonment by the West of it, Biden's serious troubles, and the Israel war, Gaza war, specifically the spat of the right-wing censorship and cancellation of the pro-Palestinian voices. This is the heart of it to me. So let's go back. And now I want to go back.
Iran into oblivion. I think we.
My bad. Gotta go back one more. To this one. So now let's go to Joe Biden, and that's at the 18th mock.
Tolerance for erosion of free speech.
Lose in a theoretical match.
Tolerance for erosion of free speech in the name of Israel before, but
now let's listen to the conversation on Joe Biden.
The severity of it is surprising.
I would like to think there's an even bigger constituency for pro-America, but there doesn't seem to be, at least it's not represented in the Congress. So I have to ask about President Biden. These polls come out over the weekend showing that he's losing in a theoretical matchup among registered voters in 5 out of 6 swing states, the biggest swing states. It looks like if the election were held today, if not much changes, he would lose. And immediately you have David Axelrod, Bill Kristol, pretty devoted Biden voters saying we need a new guy. What do you make of that polling? Do you think it reflects reality? And what do you think will happen to Biden?
I think the most amazing part about this, Tucker, is that if any leading American politician had even gotten near the possibility of an indictment 10 years ago, the prospect of them running for high office would be instantly over. And here you have Donald Trump, who has been indicted on felony charges in 4 different American jurisdictions, 2 state jurisdictions, 2 federal jurisdictions. And not only has it not harmed him, it actually has helped him in the polls for sure among Republican voters. His lead has expanded every time he's indicted, but also among American independents and even groups that traditionally support Democrats almost reflexively, like Black voters who 22% of in this latest poll, and we've seen similar polls say they would vote for Trump over Biden, and 42% of Latinos. And what this shows is that Americans have really come to the conclusion that our leading institutions of authority are radically corrupted. Our media outlets are radically corrupted. The Department of Justice and the
to Glenn's point here, and we've made it on Nick and CJ's show, maybe not as explicitly as he's doing it here, but this is a great point because how we talk about it, Nick and I talk about, report cards. The media is reading over the report cards when they're looking at these poll numbers, but what Glenn is saying here is spot on, that what the Trump candidacy also represents on a larger scale than anything else is that people aren't listening to what the media is telling them. People aren't listening to the CNNs, the Washington Posts, the New York Times, because they're the ones that's pushing all of these indictments. They're the ones that's pushing the 91 counts against Donald Trump. They're the one that's pushing all the negative stories about him everywhere. And he's still winning. He's still winning up in 5 of the 6 swing states. He's still winning nationally. So to his point, it is an indication of that, which is great.
The legal system has been aggressively politicized. And so now Donald Trump is in a position where he's facing serious felony charges. I don't think they're serious in the sense that they're real, but they're serious in the sense that if he's convicted, he'll go to jail. They're felony charges. And yet his lead is expanding over Joe Biden, in part because people, I think, see the injustice of it. But also everybody can just look at Joe Biden and see that he is not a person capable of even managing his own life, much less the country.
Yes.
And that there's no cure for that. That's not going to get better. That's only going to get worse. And what their strategy now is to basically say to Americans, and I've seen many articles about this, many things on television, the problem is that American voters are ignorant. They're ill-informed. They're low information voters, and that's why they're deciding this way, because the Democratic Party, I think, is stuck with Joe Biden. If he's not going to go anywhere, and he's the kind of politician who has never sacrificed his own personal self-interest for any kind of greater cause, there's no reason to expect that he would do so now. They're tied at the hip to him, and they see these polls and are in extreme panic mode. I think if you have liberal friends, you should definitely check on how they're doing after that last poll, because it's not just a Biden collapse. It's in key swing states, all of which he won in 2020, where Trump now has a significant lead despite 4 indictments. So all their efforts to try and destroy Trump have failed, at least until now. And I don't think the Democratic Party is going to abandon Joe Biden. If he wants to run, he's going to be their nominee.
So there seems, and maybe we're imagining this, we pulled together a montage of media coverage of Biden recently. I want you to listen to it. It does seem a little different from what I remember last time I watched TV. Here it is.
A stunning New York Times Siena poll shows that Donald Trump leading Joe Biden in Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, and Michigan.
The number of Americans who think that things are going badly in the country today has hit its high for the year. So you might expect any incumbent to be down as Biden is. But then look at these positive views of what people think will happen for them financially if Donald Trump wins. Way more voters think they'd be better off.
I guess the big news in the poll is that Biden is losing to Donald Trump because of huge losses among Black voters and young voters.
The more diverse the swing state, the farther Mr. Biden was behind, and he led only in the whitest of 6.
Then let's look overseas. There's more voters, we find, who think that it's Trump that would keep the U.S. out of a war if he wins.
This is probably going to lead to a lot of Democrats increasing the chatter and make room for another Democrat.
I love that white liberals are the only people who like Biden. So perfect. But the media don't appear, maybe I'm reading too much of this, they don't appear to be downplaying this, much less ignoring it.
They're not.
They seem to be highlighting Biden's weakness. What do you make of that?
And I'll answer that question. What I make of it is that this is them trying to convince Joe Biden to drop out of the race. So, because you're like, oh, why are they all of a sudden now talking about the bad polling that Joe Biden is getting? Because he's been getting bad polling for a long time, and we've been complaining how they never talk about it. So what was the pivot now? Is that there's coming down to the wire, deadlines to file to get on ballots is coming down to the wire, and now you're seeing a push. It started with David Ignatius in the Washington Post talking about Joe Biden shouldn't run. That was the title of that article. We covered it. And now to get this latest New York Times Siena poll that shows him losing in 4 out of 6 states outside of the margin of error, and then a 5th state Trump is winning or leading them, but within the margin of error, he's losing the black vote. 22% of the black vote is going to Donald Trump, which is historic. But let's read briefly this part here. Why Biden shouldn't be taking black support for granted. A recent found 22% of black voters in 6 battleground states said they would support former president in next year's election, while 71% say they would back Biden. The total for Trump is a percentage no Republican presidential candidate has reached with black voters in a half of century. That was the subheadline. I'll read the story now. A new poll showing President Biden struggling with black voters has Democratic strategists urging the campaign to increase its outreach to a critical demographic, while black conservatives see an opportunity for the GOP to siphon support for their own candidate. The numbers in the poll released Sunday by the New York Times and Siena College were staggering for Democrats. The poll found that 22% of black voters in 6 battleground states said they would support the former president in the next election. Trump won just 8% of the black vote in 2020. That's 14 percentage points. And 6% in 2016. According to the Pew Research, no Democratic presidential candidate has won less than 80% of the black vote since the civil rights era. Until now. And that is Joe Biden. So just wanted to present one receipt to what Tucker and Glenn mentioned in that exchange about the black vote, which is very historical, that the percentage that Joe Biden's getting. And like I said, he's getting the majority of black male votes. This is talking about the total vote. But when you're saying just black men, he's getting the majority. Now, it's a slight majority. I think it's 51 or 52%. But he's getting the majority of that now, which is still kind of amazing for any Republican. And I still think it's the relentless attacking of him. It's the 91 charges. It makes him relatable to some people in the black community, in my opinion. But all right, so let's move on to the next thing. We got to make sure we get to RFK and Rashida before we get out of here. And let's move on to RFK. And we're going to start with him being the same, because there's, like I said, it's kind of 2 segments on RFK Jr. here. There's kind of 2 segments on him. And, oops. I'm clicking it. There you go. All right, we're going to start with this tweet from Fiorella. She has the video clip that we're going to be covering today. And the first segment we'll do is RFK Jr. is just another DC swamp monster. But We also have to do another segment. RFK Jr. is having, what should I say? RFK Jr.'s polling says he could win. That'll be the topic, the other topic. But we'll start here. And Aaron, you can start here. RFK Jr. proves he's just another swamp monster. And in this tweet, Fiorella Isabel, friend of the show, friend of the network, says RFK Jr. says the quiet part out loud and fully destroys his campaign. And I'm not going to read the quote that he said because I'm going to play the video, but I'll read the rest of what she says. And Fiorella goes on to say, would love to see all the people who gave me crap about RFK Jr. Zionism tell me, quote, Israel-Palestine is just one issue. Now that we're on the brink of World War III, happy to have never supported his Zionist warmongering, unhappy that my fear of U.S. funding of more wars and genocide is true. So let's listen. This is RFK Jr. sort of talking about why Israel is important to us. Genocidal Israel. Here is RFK Jr. sounding very much like a imperialist, hegemonic warmonger.
And Israel is critical. And the reason it's critical is because it's a bulwark for us in the Mideast. It's almost like having an aircraft carrier in the Mideast. It's our oldest ally. It's been our ally for 75 years. It has been an incredible ally for us in terms of the technology, the exchange. And, and building the Iron Dome, which we paid a lot for, has also taught us enormously about how to defend ourselves at home from missiles. So those military expenditures are all going, 75% of it goes to U.S. companies under the agreement, under the MOU. But if you look at what's happening in the Mideast now, Iran is now the closest allies to Iran are Russia and China. Iran also controls all of Venezuela's oil. Hezbollah is in Venezuela. They have propped up the Maduro regime, and so they control that oil supply. BRICS, Saudi Arabia is now joining BRICS. So those countries will control 90% of the oil in the world. If Israel disappears, the vacuum in the Mideast, which is, Israel is our ambassador, it's our presence, our beachhead in the Mideast, and it gives us ears and eyes in the Mideast. It gives us intelligence, it gives us the capacity to influence affairs.
So, in exchange for a genocide, or in exchange for having a strategic position in the oil-rich region, we just have to agree to a little genocide. That's all RFK Jr. is saying. How can you be non-establishment and be pro-military industrial complex? That's a new one. Let's listen some more before I comment some more. I won't comment yet.
Affairs in the Mideast. If Israel disappeared, Russia and China would be controlling the Mideast, and they control 90% of the world's oil supply, and that would be cataclysmic for U.S.
What is he saying by saying it this way? So why are you talking about Israel in a way to mean the United States needs Israel, not because of democracy, Not because it's their homeland, but because strategically it gives us essentially a military base in an oil-rich area. How is RFK Jr. non-establishment? This is our longest, biggest ally, is Israel. Longest, biggest, I mean, how much more establishment can you be? It's so funny because the same government that he calls out for corruption is the same government that's executing Israel policy. How can the government, RFK Jr., how can the government that you're calling as being corrupt and bought off, how can they not be that when it comes to Israel? Well, listen to this last part. Once again, I feel like there's 2 points I was missing because I thought I had 3.
Defend ourselves at home for missiles. So those military expenditures are all going, 75% of it goes to U.S. companies under the agreement, under the MOU.
When people keep saying this as if this is a good thing, well, the money's going to U.S. companies. How does that help the average American worker?
But if you look at what's happening in the Mideast now, Iran is now the closest allies to Iran are Russia and China.
Now, listen to what he's saying. He's non-establishment. Who are the axis of evil that establishment people talk about all the time? Russia, China, Iran. Who is he talking about? Yet we are acting like this guy is non-establishment. BRICS
and China. Iran also controls all of Venezuela's oil. Hezbollah is in Venezuela. They have propped up the Maduro regime, and so they control that oil supply. BRICS, Saudi Arabia is now joining BRICS. So those countries will control 90% of the oil in the world. If Israel disappears, the vacuum in the Mideast, which is, Israel is our ambassador, it's our presence, our beachhead in the Mideast, and it gives us ears and eyes in the Mideast. It gives us
ears and eyes in the Middle East. That sounds like the real reason we advocate for Israel, not because of some sort of Jewish homeland. It's because of what this guy, this so-called non-establishment Pearson, is speaking very establishment vernacular. This guy is just not the greatest, in my opinion. This guy, RFK Jr. I think there's only one person who dislikes him more than me, and that's probably Sabrina. Maybe the only person that dislikes this freaking turd sandwich more than me. So let's move to the other part. I was going to accompany an article, but we don't have the time. We're going to stay on RFK, but now we're going to move to, actually, let's stay here, actually. So I got one more. A couple more receipts. So let's show those receipts really quick here. And I think I just got reaction. So I read you Fiorella's reaction. Here is Nick. Israel-Palestine isn't a big deal. This line from RFK Jr. supporters aged like milk. And then here is this headline. And like I said, this is from Sabby. Sabby says, RFK Jr. is defending Bill Ackman because Bill was one of his donors. Why is RFK Jr. taking money from hedge fund manager? This guy is playing people. Investor Bill Ackman, David Sachs, PAC donated to RFK Jr.'s presidential campaign. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying, bravo to him. It's time to hold college administrators responsible for the epidemic on campus, anti-Semitism, by insisting on zero tolerance. So if you didn't understand, Bill Ackman is calling for censorship, and RFK Jr. is shouting him out for that. And that's because Bill Ackman is a donor to RFK Jr., as Sabby points out here. And then it's just some other reaction about the hedge fund donation and the support by RFK and vice versa. It was Scott Horton. Last Friday, RFK's entire field team, led by Dana Rohrabacher's wife, all quit. Maybe he should stop taking bad advice from foreign powers about restricting the scarce right of Americans to say whatever we want. Like, for example, go F yourself, Mr. Kennedy. Disgraceful. Here is Danny Haifong. RFK Jr. says the Quiet Part law, Israel is a stronghold for us. It's like having an aircraft carrier in the Middle East. If Israel disappears, Russia, China, and BRICS countries will control 90% of the world's oil, and this will be a disaster. More on that. Now we're going to move to the other part, but I do want to play this first. This is talking about RFK Jr.'s team quitting. This is Jimmy Dore.
It's time to hold college administrations responsible for the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tweeted out, bravo to Bill Ackman. It's time to hold college administrations responsible for the epidemic of campus anti-Semitism by insisting on zero tolerance policies. So he's coming out against free speech now. So he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. It's
not. By the way, I'm sure. What is the anti-Semitism? Did they pull down posters of the missing hostages?
I don't know what it is.
That's the one I keep seeing, and I keep going. But why are there posters here? Are we supposed to like?
So, but the story here is last Friday, RFK Jr.'s entire field team, led by Representative Dana Rohrabacher's wife, all quit.
How many people's that?
And that's Scott Horton. He's Mr. Anti-War, and
maybe get Peter down.
And so maybe get Peter down. So at the same time, his former campaign manager put this out. This is Dennis Kucinich's Substack, The Math of Murder. The subjugation and annihilation of innocent civilians bombed into the dust of collateral damage does not support America, Israel, or the West claims for moral high ground and a path to peace. So a lot of people think that this is over RFK's rabid, crazy mental defense of the indefensible happening in Israel.
And I mean, obviously that's the case, regardless of what they're saying. And I don't know what they're saying. Obviously, Dennis Kucinich and the team leaving, it's over Israel. It's because of Israel. And it's not a coincidence that he puts out this article. This is Dennis Kucinich writing about what's happening in Palestine, Israel. And then you have, I just covered, just showed you, then you have Robert F. Kennedy literally advocating on the other side of this. Literally advocating the opposite of what Dennis Kucinich is calling out in this article on his Substack.
And Palestine right now, it is indefensible. And RFK Jr. gave a speech maybe a week or two ago where he was anti-China, anti-Iran, and anti-Venezuela, and he combined them all together. And it's just the opposite of what I thought he was.
Was he Sirhan? Did they just flip his murder switch?
Something happened. So here's what Dennis Kucinich wrote. He said on Tuesday, October 31st, 2023, the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bombed a Palestinian refugee camp with 100,000 inhabitants, producing a hellscape of casualties, 50 dead, 150 injured, with buildings in collapse at the periphery of a massive bomb crater. The stated public intention was to kill a single Hamas commander.
Is this the one that broke Wolf Blitzer?
Well, that's the one that broke Wolf Blitzer. There are 2 million Palestinians warehoused in the sliver of land 26 miles long, between 2 to 7 miles wide. A containment camp known as the Gaza Strip, holding indigenous peoples of the region hostage. Mr. Netanyahu has vowed to wipe out Hamas, which is estimated to have at least 40,000 members. If the ratio of 50 to 1 holds up, that is 50 Palestinians will die for every Hamas member killed. Then
That's
every
insane.
single Palestinian in Gaza would be killed. So if you go by that metric, this is not without possibility. Perhaps the colonizers' plan.
Well, okay, it doesn't have to go that way. If Egypt would just step up and they're good with either way. Either you can take all the people into your countries, or we can kill them all.
Or we'll just kill them all.
If you feel so bad about them, why don't you help them?
So the further prosecution of this war is, by the way, they do. Syria has taken in over 500,000 Palestinians.
Yeah. So has Europe, and they're all protesting now, and they're all going, how's this happening?
I think there's 2 million in Jordan. I think there's 2 million Palestinians. So this idea that why don't they but we're going to get to that, because that's going to be coming up in a Norman Finkelstein clip that's going to be coming up later. The further prosecution of this war is counterproductive to the security and survival of Israel and its citizens, who live in an increasingly hostile environment, as the images of the plight of Gazans are broadcast to billions worldwide and to hundreds of millions of enraged Muslims and Arabs in the region. So what this war is doing, this all idea is we're going to wipe out Hamas. Oh, and then I guess you won't have any more terrorists. But you're going to make 40,000, 50,000, 100,000 more terrorists in the process of trying to wipe out 40,000. Do you understand? So this is there's the thing called blowback. That's the CIA's own term for when they go and mess things up and kill a lot of people and they create terrorists.
Well, Jimmy,
that's what the United States has been doing since 9/11, creating more terrorists worldwide by wiping out Libyans, Syrians, Afghanistans, Yemenis, Sudanese. And so so this war is actually making Israel way less safe in the eyes of the entire world, because you're turning the entire world against you.
And that's the point that we've made here many times on RBN. Specifically, Nick makes all the time. Zionism and the practice of it and the process of it is what makes Jews unsafe around the world. That's what makes Jews unsafe. I'm going to pivot to the next part of this presentation on RFK Jr., and that is his polling. So let's listen to this here. Oops.
What if the answer is...
This is Dan Abrams live, and we're going to listen to him sum up happening with RFK Jr. And it just reminds me of such a missed opportunity by Cornel West when he moved from the Green Party. But let's listen. This RFK Jr. could actually win, apparently.
We've talked a lot on this show about who the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. helps more, Biden or Trump. What if the answer is kind of neither? What if the candidate who gains the most from RFK's entry into the 2024 presidential race actually is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Because up until now, we've mostly talked about his role as a possible spoiler. But a stunning new poll shows that he has the potential to be much more than that. And if these numbers hold, he actually has a chance to win the presidency. Now, remember this New York Times poll, right? Had everyone buzzing about Trump leading Biden in 5 of 6 key battleground states. But it also shows that in those 6 key battleground states, RFK is very much within striking distance of both Trump and Biden in a hypothetical 3-way matchup. The poll has RFK at a whopping 24%, well within striking distance of both Trump and Biden. Trump currently leads the potential 3-way race in the battlegrounds with 35, Biden has 33. That's not all. The poll finds that among voters under 45, RFK actually leads both Trump and Biden in those states. He pulls down 31% among voters 30 to 44.
So I'll pause it here. This is amazing. And again, the reason to me RFK Jr. running as an independent is worlds apart from Cornel West's independent campaign is that Cornel West doesn't have the ability or hasn't shown the ability to raise money. RFK is raising money. So that means you're going to have the money to pay the tens of thousands of people you need to hire to get signatures, to go get the several 100,000 signatures you're going to have to get across all the 50 states. You got the money to hire them. That's key to getting on these states as an independent candidate is literally money so you can hire the number of people to go out and get the signatures that you need. Continue.
Among voters 30 to 44, just ahead of both Trump and Biden, we each have 30%. He fares even better among the youngest voters. Poll shows RFK has 34% support, with voters in the 18 to 29 category, solidly ahead of Biden at 30 and Trump at 29. This comes on the heels of a new Quinnipiac poll, which shows RFK pulling in 22% nationwide, trailing Biden, they say, at 39, Trump at 36. But the reality is he is a serious player in the 2024 race, and the partisan media continues to just ignore him.
Now, if RFK continues to run and gets on other ballots, thus proving he's not a plant, will the Democrats regret not opening up the primary where they could have squashed his candidacy, instead forcing him to run as an independent where they don't have the ability to squash his candidacy? So,
I mean, look at the disparity in coverage between the 3 on major cable news networks. Over the last month, you can see President Biden got more than 22,000 combined mentions. Former President Trump got more than 18,000. And on those same networks, RFK Jr. got 52. Now, I'm not saying he should be getting equal coverage. Of course not. But for every time RFK is mentioned on partisan cable news, Biden and Trump are mentioned roughly 400 times. Are they intentionally ignoring him?
Yes.
Let's ask John Ziegler, conservative commentator and host of the Death of Journalism podcast. John, thanks for coming back. Appreciate it. Are they doing it on purpose?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why they're doing the stand. First, let's talk about why it's happening. This is a damning indictment of this choice that it seems that we're going to have next year between Trump and Biden. This is like going to your doctor and your doctor saying, you got 2 choices, lobotomy or castration.
Oh,
Pick
goodness.
one. Most people are going to decide, do I have another choice? What's my third option here? And so RFK Jr. is doing very well in that third option category. I happen to believe that any nonpartisan celebrity would probably do as well as RFK Jr., a Charles Barkley or a Deion Sanders. I'd love to see those names tried there. But News Nation is obviously very much focused on this issue of partisanship. And I think that really hits at the heart of the RFK issue. And that is that the left wing and the right wing media don't know what to do with RFK Jr. because of the question you started this segment with. Who does he help or hurt the most? And we don't know that yet. I happen to have believed before this New York Times poll that the better RFK Jr. did, the worse it was for Biden. But that's not what this poll shows. In fact, it shows the opposite. The better RFK Jr. does, the better it is actually for Joe Biden. So you're not going to have the left-wing media or the right-wing media take a position on RFK Jr. until they know whether or not it helps their guy.
But they're also not even taking it seriously. I mean, there's a new CNN poll out tonight, which literally didn't even ask about RFK Jr., right? I mean, they're just making it about Trump and Biden. And when you look at these numbers, again, I'm stunned by the numbers too. I'm stunned that among people basically 45 and younger in the battleground states, he's winning.
That's pretty shocking. 35 and under, or did he say 39? Whichever, 35, 39 and under, winning. I think it was at a 34% mark, 29 for Trump and like 30 for Biden. He's winning. So with those numbers, I guess theoretically he has the potential of winning. But again, the reason Cornel West cannot and will not be in the same position running as an independent, because he will not have the ability to raise money, because he's really not running a real campaign. Okay. So, but we will update this story as the campaign moves along and see if the polling stays as strong, or if it goes up. Now let's move to another shorter, very short story, and this is with Anna Kasparian. Anna Kasparian declaring that she is not going to be voting for Joe Biden. But let me read what Nick says here. And he says, the social democrats who preached harm reduction and lesser of two evils for years have to do these performances now because their entire ideology got destroyed by the Biden administration. These same people smeared RBN for being right on this issue from day one. So in order to save face, I agree with Nick, they have to go on these performances to save face, because they put all their chips in on this harm reduction Joe Biden, and it's completely crumbling in their faces. We're talking about proxy war with Ukraine. We're talking about war with China. We're talking about war with supporting a genocide in Israel, completely collapsing in their faces. This is a less than 1 minute clip. Let's listen to Anna declare she's not supporting Joe Biden.
The George W. Bush administration condemned the Israeli government for doing an airstrike in Gaza that took out one Hamas militant but killed 14 other civilians. Think about how disgusting and devolved our country has gotten, where Joe Biden can't outdo the war criminal George W. Bush, where George W. Bush has more morality than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. I will not be voting for Joe Biden under any circumstance. I don't care about any other policy that he has championed. I cannot, as an Armenian American, support a president who has greenlit the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. This, for me, is the red line.
I would say
the George.
Let me hear this part again.
Who has greenlit the ethnic.
I would say the voters who voted Joe Biden in greenlit the genocide, because it starts from how did Joe Biden get here to where he's the decision maker to decide whether to fund and support genocide, Anna. So to me, that's the starting point. What coalition got him here? And the vast majority of the Bernie Sanders industrial media complex did that. The Humanist Reports, the TYT, including Anna Kasparian right here, the Rational Nationals, and all of the other shows that supported Joe Biden, you have blood on your hands over this genocide. And I'm going to let it play one more time and then get a reaction and then close out this segment.
The George W. Bush administration condemned the Israeli government for doing an airstrike in Gaza that took out one Hamas militant but killed 14 other civilians. Think about how disgusting and devolved our country has gotten, where Joe Biden can't outdo the war criminal George W. Bush.
She makes
where
a good
George
point.
W. Bush has more morality than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. I will not be voting for Joe Biden under any circumstance. I don't care about any other policy that he has championed. I cannot, as an Armenian American, support a president who has greenlit the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. This, for me, is the red line.
Yeah, and I'm not
George
gonna,
W. Bush.
I'm not gonna trash Anna for reaching this place. I do want to say, let's see if she follows through. But if she does follow through, I'm not gonna, critique her because she took longer to get to this place than I have. But I will say, let's cautiously watch and see, because we still got 12 months to go, and a lot can happen to cause her to say, "Oh, I changed my mind," because she said under no circumstance. But is it really under no circumstance? Is that really going to be the line that she draws? And I just don't buy that. So, like I said, we're going to wait and see if this is the case, but I'm happy that Anna has reached this place, and I welcome her and anybody who would listen to her to reach the same conclusion. So awesome. All right, let's quickly, now I'm going to have to do a longer segment on this, but I'm going to go ahead and play Nick's video on the
human history,
the censuring of Rashida Tlaib before we get out of here. And I'll throw this up here. So I'll just play this. Rashida Tlaib gets censured, and understand, being censured literally means nothing. It is a slap on the wrist. It's purely symbolic. And here's what Nick says: the most violent institution in human history that is currently sponsoring a genocide censured Rashida Tlaib for her use of the slogan "From the river to the sea." Zionists must tone police and attack speech because they are losing the battle of ideas, and that's spot on. And here is Nick's video that sums it all up.
The most violent institution in human history, the United States Congress, just voted to censure their only Palestinian congressperson as they are committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. The United States Congress censured Rashida Tlaib because Rashida Tlaib's support for the Palestinian people hurt the feelings of their Zionist donors. As literally what it is. Everything else they say is bullshit. Even though this is a disgusting move by Congress, Rashida Tlaib should absolutely wear this as a badge of honor. If you are an elected progressive in Congress, the most violent, corrupt institution in human history, how are you not being censured? If I was ever elected to Congress, I will be censured in 2 weeks tops. I think that should be our new standard. Like, hey, Nick, we elected you 6 months ago and you haven't been censured yet. What the hell is going on? The United States Congress has an approval rating of 17%. The United States Congress is out of compliance with the American people, and they think they have the right to censure people? If I was a congressman, these clowns with 70% approval ratings try to censure me, I'll just laugh right in their face. One more quick thing. Don't forget that 22 Democrats joined with Republicans to help pass this censure. Liberals supporting the slaughter of the Palestinian people and censuring people who speak up for it shows exactly why we say liberals will always side with genocidal fascists over people who resist oppression.
Facts on top of facts, and that's Nick's video. Now I just want to show a couple of reaction. Here is Cori Bush, and she says, yesterday, Congress voted to censure Rashida Tlaib, the sole Palestinian American serving in Congress. Our own colleagues who talked with her, laughed with her, spent time with her, and smiled in her face, Sounds like Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib are finding out that Congress is a bunch of snakes, and you shouldn't have been playing nice with them from the beginning. You should have been adversarial towards them from the beginning. Here's another tweet. Here is Rashida Tlaib right here saying, I am the only Palestinian American serving in Congress, and my perspective is needed here now more than ever. I will not be silenced, and I will not let anyone distort my words. I'm from Detroit, where I've learned to speak truth to power, even if my voice shakes. I'll play a little bit of her speech here. Let's listen.
Much bigger than one person. It's growing every single day. There are millions of people across our country who oppose Netanyahu's extremism and are done watching our government support collective punishment and the use of white phosphorus bombs that melt flesh to the bone. They are done watching our government, Mr. Chair, supporting cutting off food, water, electricity, and medical care to millions of people with nowhere to go. Like me, Mr. Chair, they don't believe the answer to war crimes is more war crimes. The refusal of Congress and the administration to acknowledge Palestinian lives is chipping away at my soul. Over 10,000 Palestinians have been killed. Majority were children. But let me be clear. My criticism has always been of the Israeli government and Netanyahu's actions. It is important to separate people and governments, Mr. Chair. No government is beyond criticism. The idea that criticizing the government of Israel is anti-Semitic sets a very dangerous precedent, and it's being used to silence diverse voices speaking up for human rights across our nation. Do you realize what it's like, Mr. Chair, for the people outside the chamber right now, listening in agony to their own government dehumanizing them? To hear the President of the United States we helped elect dispute death tolls as we see video after video of dead children and parents under rubble? Mr. Chair, do you know what it's like to fear rising hate crimes, to know how Islamophobia and anti-Semitism makes us all less safe, and worry that your own child might suffer the horrors that 6-year-old Wadia did in Illinois?
I'll stop there. She goes on to give a speech. It gets a little, or finish her speech, I should say, and it gets a little emotional for her. And you know this channel and the critiques we have for the squad, including her. But this is a moment where I do support Rashida Tlaib, and I do give kudos to those sitting behind her that's supporting her. That's the Cori Bushes, even Ayanna Pressley, that's Summer Lee, and then Pramila Jayapal, Ilhan Omar, and I forget the gentleman's name immediately to Rashida's right. But she's right in this case. Again, the censure isn't much, so it's not that big of a deal. But the vote count was 234, 22 of them being Democrats who voted against her. If those 22 Democrats would not have voted against her, it would not have passed. And that is just a fact. We ended there. Let's move on to Super Chat so I can get out of here. Pro-Palestinian protesters are simply anti-genocide. That is correct. I agree, Amanda. Thank you for your super chat. And we have another one. Helpful harm. I told people Jill Stein had alternative motives when she brought Dow on Green Party is corporate when we need votes, Socialist Claudia Dela Cruz. And luckily, I will have all of these candidates on my ballot in California: Jill Stein, Claudia Dela Cruz, even Cornel West on my ballot, RFK Jr. too, of course. And thank you for that super chat. I think I got one more. You thought free speech, but it was white supremacy. And that's Donnie. Thank you for that super chat. And a super sticker from Amanda. Thank you, Amanda, for the super sticker. And that is the last super chat that I got. This has been a great stream. Thank you, everybody who was here and watched. Hit that like button on your way out. I would love to get to 1,000 likes for this video, but right now I think we're going to be approaching 500 or so. So hit that like button on your way out. And don't forget, today, Thursday, we have the Sabby and JB show. That will be coming up. So make sure you stick around for that. And then tomorrow, we still have a Nick and CJ show. I believe we're still doing a Nick and CJ. So make sure you stay around tomorrow. Outside of that, thank you for watching. I'm out.